Hi, and welcome to our podcast where I'm here with not one but two Doctors Davila. I'm your host, Amanda Davila. This is a family affair, and with me I have
Dr. Daniel Davila.
And also Dr. Hector Davila.
Excellent. So today our topic of conversation are buzzwords that make people think that things are nutritious when they actually aren't. Correct?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to start off with things that say AHA certified. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, things certified by the American Heart Association, which would lead most people to believe that if the American Heart Association says that it's good for you, that it is. However, unfortunately, a lot of times that is just simply not the case, correct?
Yep, I'm going to let you start off with this since I've kind of prepared stuff beforehand, so cover whatever you'd like to cover.
Okay. Well, especially in the last year with the American Heart Association, one thing that I've been realizing is that most of what they say or what they end up approving that is certified is pretty controversial when you actually take a look at research from independent sources. It's pretty plain to see that there's a lot of interference from commercial interests in getting this American Heart Association designation. You can go in the grocery store and you'll see a lot of the things that have this label are things like cereal, breads, grains, things that actually have a lot of hidden sugar in them. And a lot of times even more recently, the American Heart Association's rulings on saturated fat and its effect on the body is being overturned, and is actually being shown that the way the American Heart Association tries to deter people from consuming healthy fats like saturated fats is just not really supported by any credible evidence.
So you're telling me that my morning bowl of wonderful oat ring cereal is not good for me?
That's absolutely right. That's just not the healthiest meal for you. You'd be better off having bacon and eggs.
But doesn't bacon and eggs have a lot of fat and cholesterol, and won't that clog my arteries and give me diabetes and all the bad things?
No, it's actually the exact opposite, and I'm really glad that you bring that up. It's been a common myth since the 70s and 80s that saturated fat from things like bacon, eggs, animal fat is going to cause you to have heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, all these horrible things. And the reality is the recommendations to move into low-fat and no-fat diets has actually been associated with huge increases in spikes in those things. So we really want to get away from the breads, the grains, the cereals, and more towards healthy fats, vegetables, healthy produce as a rule.
So basically what you're saying is that fat, saturated fat specifically.
Right.
So things not like hydrogenated oils like canola oil and peanut oil, but more things like lard and butter, real butter, is what I should be eating as opposed to, my avocado toast in the morning. The toast is bad, the avocado is good, yes?
That's exactly right. You want to go more towards the animal fats, quality animal fats, as well as some other saturated fats, things like coconut oil are really good options for you.
Okay, cool. And Dan, what is your background? I introduced you as Dr. Davila, but what are you a doctor of? What is your background?
I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I'm a chiropractor. I also have certification as a certified chiropractic wellness practitioner through the International Chiropractors Association's Council on Wellness Lifestyle Sciences. Basically what that means is not only as part of the core curriculum of my education was nutrition very important, but I also have a couple hundred postgraduate hours in nutrition and lifestyle counseling to help patients get on the right track and making better lifestyle decisions.
Awesome. All right, so other Dr. Davila, Dr. Hector Davila, what is your background?
I am a registered pharmacist, so I got my doctorate in pharmacy, and I'm also a primal health coach and a CrossFit trainer at Absolution CrossFit in LaGrange, Illinois.
And what is a primal health coach? What does that mean?
Basically, primal health coach, I can help people with lifestyle modifications that are based on ancestral health, looking at human history and seeing which cultures and groups of people have done the best as far as health, and taking clues from those and trying to incorporate them into our modern day lives.
Okay.
So we covered our first term, which was the AHA certification, and we covered everything pretty much that I wanted to make sure that we mentioned, including the coconut oil fiasco and the saturated fat fiasco. So let's move on to our next term.
All right, and our next term is calories per serving. So like those awesome little 100-calorie packs and things with Weight Watchers where you get points per calories and all of that. So how is that bad? Why is that a misnomer, a thing that we should not be paying attention to?
Well, pretty much at the base of it all is that our bodies don't simply run on calories. The quality of the calories has a lot to do with how our bodies are going to respond to them. So for example, if you have 100 calories of carbohydrate versus 100 calories of fat, your body is going to treat them very differently. It's going to have a different metabolic response. And
so 100 calories of carbohydrate versus 100 calories of fat. What does that mean? Like 100 calories of gummy bears versus walnuts?
Could be. Walnuts are not pure fat, but gummy bears are almost pure sugar. So yeah, you're going to have more insulinogenic response to something like gummy bears.
So it makes your blood sugar rise, is that what you're saying?
It will make your blood sugar rise, and if it's something that is constantly happening is something that could contribute towards prediabetes and even diabetes if it's a long-term thing.
Going along those same lines, there's also the fact, I've been having this discussion more and more with people online and with my patients, is the idea that not all calories are created equal. Like you mentioned, these little 100-calorie pack items, it really depends on what exactly is it 100 calories of. Again, if it's 100 calories of Cheerios versus like 100 calories of quality protein or quality animal fats, that's going to make a huge difference in the way your body's hormones respond to it. And again, if the goal is ultimately to move people in direction of having less likelihood of developing chronic degenerative illnesses, things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, you can't not take into account how the food that they're eating affects their hormones, because that's the all-important issue. So yeah, it's just looking at it. It's a really oversimplified way of thinking about it to say, well, it's only 100 calories. How bad can it be? Well, there's good and there's bad in the sense of how it ends up affecting your body's hormones. That's something that's really more important than the calorie count.
Okay, so it is not how many calories you're consuming, it is where the calories come from, obviously.
The quality of the calories and how it's ultimately going to end up affecting your hormones, yes.
Is there any benefit to counting calories at all, assuming that they're coming from quality sources like fruits and vegetables and animal fats and things like that?
Personally, I would say no, just because of the reading that I've done over the years. It is entirely possible for somebody to change their diet in a way that is beneficial for them, that is healthy for them, where they're actually taking in more calories rather than less. And in the course of eating this diet that is still healthier, although higher in calories, they can still lose weight, they can change their body composition in a positive way. And so to me, I really don't like focusing on calories at all.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's generally just not that important.
Okay.
I would agree with that for the most part. I think that calorie counting in general really only helps you out if you, let's say, just don't have any idea of what kind of calorie consumption you have. So to get a general idea, just so that you're in ballpark, I think there's some value to that. Or if you have very specific goals, like if you're a performance athlete and you need to be watching your macronutrients. But also we need to keep in mind that straight up calories do not take into account your micronutrients. So calories are basically just fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, but that's not to say anything to where you're getting your fiber, your vitamins, your minerals. So it's important to think about that also. So not a very useful number by itself, but if you have very specific goals, you can start to monitor that a little bit more closely.
Okay, but just for the average person, like say myself, that I'd like to lose a few pounds, before summer, counting calories is not beneficial. I just need to pay attention to what I'm eating. Not how many calories everything has.
Looking at the quality of what you are eating, and if you eat very well, your body's going to be very intuitive on its caloric needs. You'll be hungry when you're supposed to. You won't be hungry when you're not supposed to. So, yeah, I'd say, like I said, general ballpark idea, fine. But I wouldn't be somebody who would be like, I need to stay under like 1,600 calories or something like that, unless, like I said, you have a very specific goal.
Okay. All right. So another buzzword term, and I believe, Hector, you actually took an online survey, put it out there for people to say a lot of these things that they read that make them think that things are healthier. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually did a Facebook poll I put it out to the members of my gym. Actually, no, I think I just opened it up to Facebook. Yeah, I just put it up on Facebook because I was trying to get a good sense of words that are used in food marketing that lead people to believe that something is supposed to be healthy.
Okay.
So that is where we farmed out all of the terms that we're going to be talking about.
Right. So these aren't just things that you two don't particularly like. These are actually terms that the average person has said, oh, I read this on a package and I think that this is healthy.
No, not the average person, because it's all people that are friends with me on Facebook, so they're extraordinary individuals.
Wow. Such a suck up. All right, but the next term is energy. Things like 5-Hour Energy, Red Bull, Rockstar, Monster, Full Throttle, any kind of energy drink that's supposed to give you ample energy to get through your day because days are stressful.
Yeah. Pretty much any one of these products you're mentioning is 5-Hour Energy, Red Bull, Rockstar, Monster. There's all different kinds of variations you can find in most grocery stores, pretty much any health food store, vitamin store. The thing you're going to find without fail when you look at the labels on those things, which I would strongly suggest people are doing if they're going to be paying for supplements or these supposed health foods, is learn how to read the label and know what you're looking at. What you're going to find probably 9 times out of 10 with these is that they're loaded with either some combination of these or one particular ingredient of this. There's caffeine, there's sugar, there's B vitamins, and they may throw in some different amino acids that really may or may not have any benefit, just depending on what else is in there. The energy that you can definitely get energy out of it. You can definitely get a jolt of or boost of energy, but the question is, how long is it going to last for you, and is that really the right way to go about doing it?
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times also, since the energy that you're getting is usually sugar, it's usually going to be followed by that crash, because you're going to basically be feeding your body glucose. You're going to have that insulin response like we were talking about earlier. That's going to sweep all of this excess sugar that is in your bloodstream, and since the insulin is doing its job and clearing it from your bloodstream, you're going to have that crash later. So you may have a short-term gain in energy. Think about kids just buzzing after their sugar, and but eventually you're going to have that crash, and that could put you on a cycle of just constantly trying to refeed that energy need.
And that can sort of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, I think, as far as if you're eating properly, your body will tell you when you're hungry. But if you are doing something like a sugar crash cycle, you may get a craving for something that you don't actually need, which will screw up your body's intuition.
Yeah. So
like when I, just really want a Snickers bar or some popcorn or something that's not good for me. And I talk to a lot of people that have that issue. But I want the pasta. I need the pasta makes me happy. I need the pasta.
Well, that is another issue that we can talk about, where sugar has been shown to have addictive properties, and pasta also being a wheat product. Wheat is actually a really bad culprit as far as where it's been shown that it actually can be addictive. It changes your body's wants for it, so you actually do crave it more so than you actually would ever need it. You don't need it, but yeah, it does definitely put your body into that cycle and can actually affect multiple hormone pathways. And overall, if you continue to feed that cycle, it's going to be one of the things that leads you to the obesity, because you're constantly having this insulin response and crashing, and then having to refeed, and eventually it can lead to things like diabetes. So yeah, all kinds of problems that can be caused by that.
The really interesting issue also, or a really interesting thing, just going back to the first label that we talked about, the American Heart Association certified. If you go and you have, let's say, a big bowl of wheat bran that's been certified by the American Heart Association, you're probably going to get a huge spike in blood sugar, a huge spike in insulin. That's only going to last for maybe a couple of hours, and then by, let's say noon, you're going to find yourself looking for the next spike in your insulin, your sugar levels. That's probably going to end up being a 5-Hour Energy or a Rockstar. But again, you're going to get in this cycle where you're just constantly doing peaks and valleys with your blood sugar and your insulin. Nothing is really holding well for you, and it's actually moving you in the direction of some kind of chronic illness.
Okay. So is there anything in particular that either of you would recommend? It's 4 o'clock. It's going to be a really long day. I've still got 8 hours before I can relax. I need a little pick-me-up. Is there something that is better for you, that is somewhat healthy, that you guys could recommend?
I think it really depends on the person and where their metabolism is. If they are somebody who is a sugar junkie, it's hard to make another recommendation because they're not able to use other metabolic pathways for energy as well as somebody who, let's say, is ketogenic and they're able to use fats for energy. So kind of a middle ground, I'd say maybe something like coconut, where they get those medium chain triglycerides. Those are kind of like a bridge of energy. So that might be something they can try out, but it's hard to make a blanket recommendation for somebody, like I said, who might be a sugar burner versus somebody who is fat adapted or has the metabolic flexibility because they have put in that effort, but they can use both metabolic pathways. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer. Depends on the person.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It kind of depends on where the person is in their whole how they utilize energy. Going along with what he was saying, I'll talk to patients about this and they'll ask me kind of similar questions. What should I be eating?
Right.
And sometimes you have to let people know that there's going to be some growing pains they're going to have to go through where they can't just cold turkey stop the thing that they're used to. They're going to have to get used to their body going through a process where it's switching over from constantly wanting and craving and burning sugar to getting to maybe it's more reliant on body fat metabolism, which is better for you in the long term and more consistent energy, but you can't just switch over one day to the next. That's going to take some time.
Okay. All right, so I think we've covered pretty much all of that. So now the next term, ooh, this is a good one. Anything labeled fat-free or low-fat. Which my mother cannot let go of fat-free, low-fat, sugar-free, and I don't know how many times I've had to try to tell her because she's worried about my dad getting heart disease because his father died very young of heart disease.
Yeah.
And she's still bringing home fat-free everything, sugar-free, sugar substitute, I can't believe it's not butter, all of the things, and telling him to eat them when what he really wants is eggs fried in the bacon grease, which is what would be actually better for him, but she is afraid that that is bad for him. So
we'll have to make sure that she listens to this then.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. That's pretty common mentality that people, they moved away from things like the bacon, the fried eggs, with the expectation that something's going to do damage to their heart, that's going to cause them to get high cholesterol, heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, all those kind of things. And so they started moving towards these low-fat and fat-free options, which there's a really good book that was written about this. It's called Salt, Sugar, Fat. It completely talks about how the commercial food industry is really attuned to what people want and what people are afraid of and what is trending at the time. And they've gone through these cycles where fat is the enemy right now. It's in the news. It's bad for you. It's going to kill you. And so what do? They start putting out these low-fat and fat-free options. But what they don't tell you, if you're being really astute about reading your labels, you'll see this, is that they've got to replace that fat with something. And they've got to maintain the taste. They've got to maintain you wanting to eat that food.
Yep.
So what they're typically going to do is they're going to replace the fat with either salt or sugar or both. So you're not really getting ahead. You're actually falling behind when that happens. And it's just because there's a misconception about fat and cholesterol in your diet.
Okay.
Yep. And let's also talk about if something is a fat-free product that is not in its whole food form, you're usually not only taking away the fat, but you're also taking out a lot of the nutrients that go along with fat, like fat-soluble vitamins. So one of the biggest examples that comes to mind is fat-free dairy products. So fat-free milk, fat-free, cheeses, whatever it may be. You end up taking out the A, D, the E, and the K, which are things that you actually really benefit from. So you're not only taking out fat, which is going to make it a higher glycemic index product because the sugars and proteins are going to be more concentrated, so it's more likely that you are going to have an insulin response, but you're also decreasing the micronutrient value of the product that you're eating then.
So you're saying skim milk tastes like bullshit because it is bullshit.
That would be accurate.
And also, that was a lot of words there, but basically I think what you just said is something like skim milk. Once you take out all the fat, you've taken out all of the nutrition and just left the sugar pretty much, right?
You've taken out a lot
Yeah.
of the nutrition.
You
Yes.
basically got dirty water.
Okay. That makes total sense.
It's like you rinse the vat and you're drinking backwash.
This is what fell out of the vat and they're putting it in a bottle for you.
So, yeah, that's where I stand on the fat-free, low-fat stuff.
Okay, because I knew I grew up. That's another thing. My mom tried to buy skim milk, and none of the rest of the family could drink it. So we sort of settled on 1% when we should have just been drinking whole milk. Of course, this conventionally raised dairy and whatnot is a whole, no pun intended, whole other animal. You should be paying attention to where you get your meats and your dairy.
Yeah,
it does make a difference, a huge difference.
Let's also talk about so. A lot of times people will replace fats with a different fat. So like if we're talking about like a vegetable oil spread.
I can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah, stuff like that.
I can totally believe it's not butter.
So
what is it?
Margarine.
We need fats as building blocks for much of our body. So if we put the wrong fats into our body, we're basically giving our body bad building materials. So because of that, we're going to have poor tissues, poor cells, things that just aren't working optimally. So if you take something like country crock or something like that, you give yourself fats that your body is not meant to be using, but it's trying to incorporate them into your body and use them as it would regular fat, which, if we're talking about animal fats, those are going to be the fats that are what you are made out of. Whether you manufactured those even from like a vegetarian product, you made fat, you are an animal. So these are the same things that you'd be eating if you were eating animal products. But if you're eating something like a vegetable oil spread, now all of a sudden you're introducing some weird manufactured fat and your body does not know how to use it properly. Really, it should just be getting rid of it, but this is stuff that is new to our bodies, so we have not evolved to deal with this. So there's that also.
So stick to things that are naturally occurring and weren't made in a lab.
Yes.
If you have the choice.
It's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. As far as butter, I just want to throw a pitch out there. I personally love Kerrygold butter, which comes from grass-fed cows.
Yep.
Which is illegal in Wisconsin because the FDA can't regulate it, which I think is hilarious.
Is it still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny that it's kind of becoming like underground bootleg stuff to have healthy fats.
And there are plenty of other grass-fed butters and products out there, but I just happen to like Kerrygold, and it's fairly easy to find unless you live in Wisconsin.
Yeah, they've got it at Costco, which comes in handy.
Yeah, because not everyone has access to Whole Foods or something. So, all right. So the next term we have, this just says food. Okay, so anything labeled food, not F-O-O-D, not F-U-D, but F-O-O-D, food.
Yeah. So let me give a little exposition with this one. So this is actually a re-recording or a redo of a video that I had originally made for YouTube. And I wanted to redo it because it was just me that made the video, and it was very boring. It was very boring, it was very dry, but one of the things that happened was I farmed out all these terms, and my cousin Alex actually gave me this term, and I did not talk about it in the original video, and I think he was a little displeased because he aired it on Facebook. So this is a shout out to my cousin Alex. We're talking about the food now.
Awesome.
So I couldn't really find any just outstanding examples of where it was like, all right, people label this a food product. And I'm talking specifically about labeling a product food, because people do call stuff food when it isn't food. So one of the things that I wanted to just mention is like soy products. I personally don't believe that people should really be eating soy or soy products unless they have basically no other option. Disclaimer, yes, if you have organic soy and if you have fermented soy, it's not as bad as if you had GMO soy or a processed soy product. But I still don't like the idea of eating soy if you don't have to. So I'll open it up to you guys if you want to comment on food.
I would agree with that. And it, kind of going back to something we were talking about just a moment ago with the whole fat-free, low-fat conversation, I've met a lot of people, even in my school, we're a school of supposedly educated people, healthcare practitioners, there were a lot of people who went vegan or went vegetarian because they were afraid of what fats in the diet, cholesterol in the diet could do to them. And what happens so often is when somebody moves into becoming a vegan or a vegetarian is they end up taking a lot more things like wheats and grains, and yes, especially soy. You know, like he said, like my brother here said, fermented soy, organic soy may not be as bad for you as like GMO or conventionally grown soy, but it's still not something that can really be considered to be a health food per se. There are things in it that can cause inflammation, cause digestive upset, even if it's consumed excessively, could contribute towards things like autoimmune issues. And so soy is a food product in my opinion, but it's not necessarily a health food or one that people should be making a regular part of their diet.
Okay. And I know that there is soy in so many things. Soy lecithin is in pretty much everything that is pre-packaged.
That's the other thing. Going back to the whole idea of reading labels, if you get really good about realizing what words they use to show that there is soy in a product, they get to be pretty clever with it. It's not always apparent that this is soy per se, but it's a soy product.
Someone said they turned their phone on silent.
Yeah. I was incorrect.
All right, so the biggest food, I'm doing air quotes here, food that I can think of that is not food, and I think pretty much everyone universally everywhere could agree with me, is canned cheese. That's like the first thing that came to my mind, that it's not fit for human consumption.
You're talking about like Cheese Whiz?
I'm talking about cheese, spray cheese in a can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell is cheese in a can? Okay, but yes,
is that white people stuff? Is that like
No,
did Latinos
I mean,
not eat
yes,
that?
but I've had that in my past.
All right.
It's part of the past, thankfully.
Part of the past.
Actually, going along with this conversation as far as the whole idea of food, I actually posted something on Twitter a couple days ago talking about how, you know, I generally don't watch television just because of the fact that it's so filled with garbage that it's not even worth my time. It's not really worth most people's time. But when you watch television, you can't help seeing commercials. And you see a lot of commercials for processed foods where they say that this is part of a balanced diet. Mm-hmm. It's a food product that they are claiming is part of a balanced diet. And I think when you hear that, you really have to understand that the balanced diet part is what's really so important. You can't eat that and consider it to be healthy. You should really be focusing more on the balanced diet of actual foods from healthy animals, healthy plant sources, and stay away from those food products as often as possible.
Okay, and I think a lot of those products that you just mentioned, part of a healthy diet, are often endorsed by the American Heart Association.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. FDA, American Heart Association endorsed, totally fine. A lot of diabetes associations now putting their brand on certain food products, and it just blows my mind because these are things that contribute to the heart disease and the diabetes if you actually know how they affect the body.
Well,
Yeah.
I always sort of get a kick out of they'll have like a Blue Buffalo, which is a pet food, an all natural pet food commercial, and talk about, oh my gosh, I was feeding my pet all of this crap, and this one has actual meat in it and real food, and then this will be immediately followed by a commercial for give your kids toaster pastries and they'll love you forever. And I'm like, we want to take better care of our pets than we do our children, and that seems insane to me.
Actually, I can speak to that point because I actually was previously employed by Blue Buffalo for a while as a pet food representative.
I actually didn't know that.
And it blew my mind that literally what I would do is I would stand there in the pet food store and I would be representing Blue Buffalo, the brand, which is what I feed my dog because, you know, doing my research online, I was like, oh, this seems like a pretty good quality product and it's reasonably priced for a health food. So I'm going to go ahead and give that to my dog. But what blew my mind was when I would be in the store talking to people who had pets and were shopping for their pet, so many of them were so knowledgeable about how what they were giving their dog to eat had an impact on the dog's health and well-being. And I would see people come in there, they've got their 20-ounce soda, their kids have their sodas and their cookies and chocolate and candy in their hands, and they're asking me, what is the healthiest pet food? Mm-hmm. And I'm just standing there staring at them thinking, well, don't you want to eat healthy too?
Yeah, so that, no matter who your pet is, I mean, I guess maybe because pets are so much more regimented, like we, as human beings, we're probably not going to be making junk food for pets anytime soon. So it just doesn't maybe occur to people that, hey, if they have to pay attention to what they
junk
put in
food
their
for pets.
bodies.
They have dog treats and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually going along with that, I had somebody come in.
Not to the extent that we do as human beings.
No.
It's there. It's just it's there for sure. Funny, not funny story. I had a guy come into the store one day when I was working in the pet store. He walked up to me and he literally said, "Hey, I don't want to hear about your product. Can you tell me where I can find the cheapest dog food?"
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." I was in the premium dog food aisle, so I said, "What you want to do is go the next aisle over towards the back of the store because that's where they put it. I won't bother saying the brand name of the product, but when you look at the ingredients list on that food, the primary ingredients are soy, corn, wheat, peas, basically all the stuff that is not natural to a dog's diet and actually contributes to the dog becoming obese, having uncontrolled blood sugar. It's the same garbage that happens to people when they treat themselves that way."
Right. I mean, there are people out there that try to make their pets vegan and then make their pets ill.
Well, that was infuriating also. Again, you have to take into account the reason why these things are so important is every animal has a diet that it should be eating that is most congruent with its genetics, that's going to facilitate it being healthy and adaptable to stress so that it can be healthy and have function for life. Human beings are the same way. And you would have cat food that was vegan. You're going to kill your cat if you're feeding it a vegan diet long term because cats are carnivores by nature. They have to have meat. And I actually asked one of the representatives one day from a brand that sold vegan cat food, between you and me, we both know that cats are carnivores, right? And he said, "Yeah, I know that." And I just pointed at the bag and I said, "Why do you guys have that?" And he goes, "You know what? Honestly, I think what they're trying to do is appeal to the vegan pet owners who don't know the difference and don't realize what they're doing to their pet."
Awesome. Well, human food companies do the same thing to people, too. Which is why we're having this conversation, actually. All of these labels that are misleading
Exactly
to people.
right. Exactly right. All right, so are we ready for our next term?
I think so.
All right, here it is.
All right. Ooh, good one. Fortified with anything that sounds healthy, basically. Vitamins, minerals.
Yep. So primary example that comes to mind immediately is either, let's say, cereal or milk. Fortified with, name a vitamin.
Vitamin D.
Yep. So
It's a big one for milk.
Well, that's huge because two reasons for milk with vitamin D. One, if it's fortified with vitamin D, it's because you've probably taken it out along with the fat. So that's two strikes right there. Not only that, but if you're fortifying it, and if we're talking about vitamin D, you can't possibly fortify it with enough vitamin D for it to give you enough vitamin D to make a decent dent in your need for vitamin D. So there's that.
What's the daily recommended dosage of vitamin D, Dr. Davila?
If we're going by the Vitamin D Council recommendations, which is what I like to go by, it's 4,000 international units to 10,000 international units daily of D3, not D2.
And that's for adults, right?
That is for adults. If we're talking about children, it's 400 international units on a daily basis.
And if you live somewhere like we do in Chicago, Illinois, where it's -8 degrees outside, you're not getting your vitamin D from outside like you should be, so you should really be taking it.
Yep, because the only two sources that you can get them from, or vitamin D, is from the sun or through dietary supplementation. And there's no food product that has vitamin D in the quantity that is sufficient for us to be healthy, at healthy levels of vitamin D.
And that's actually the only pretty much supplement you would recommend, correct? For the most part?
That is the only one that I give a general recommendation for. Yes, there are other things that you can supplement with, but I feel like most of those are on a case-by-case. But if you live here in the Midwest like we do, you most likely either should be supplementing vitamin D orally, or you should be getting some sort of sunlight therapy. Because even if you are, let's say that you decide that you want to be outside in the cold here, trying to get sun, I actually found a study from, I think it was Oregon State University. The angle that the sun hits the earth at this time of year does not allow for sufficient vitamin D production from the amount of sunlight that we get.
And vitamin D is very important for your immune system, right? So especially if you are out in public, especially working with kids or whatnot, you need to have your immunity boosted.
That is one of the things that vitamin D is good for. So another thing just to mention, since we're talking about vitamin D, is there are receptors for vitamin D found in on every cell in the body. So that should tell us something about how important vitamin D is.
All right.
Anything to say about fortified with?
Kind of along the same lines of what you already said. You do have to take into account that when they say that they're fortifying a food with some vitamin or some mineral, probably somewhere in the processing of that food, they ended up stripping that out of there, and that's the reason why they're fortifying it back in there. It's not really, they're not really doing you any favors. They're just giving you back the nutrients that should have been in there had they processed it a different way or not processed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, just because this came to mind, the idea of fortification, I believe, came about during the World War because of food supplies that were cut off or diminished because of war. So all of these deficiencies started coming about, so they started fortifying food with these things that we were having deficiencies in. But now, yes, we have food available, air quotes, food available pretty much everywhere. But if you're eating whole foods and you have a balanced diet, you're probably getting everything that you need from that. So having a food that is fortified with something really shouldn't be necessary.
I would have to say I agree with that. If you're eating a good balanced diet and you're otherwise taking care of yourself, exercising, things like that, you don't necessarily need to go fortifying your foods.
Okay. So even if you are on a very tight budget, which a lot of people are, just try to get your vitamins and minerals from fresh produce where you can, as opposed to spending money on fortified foods, even though those, sadly, a lot of times are cheaper.
Yeah, I would also say, since you're bringing up, the idea of being on a budget, if you're somebody who is on a budget or you've got really tight finances right now, that's when you start getting into kind of the gray areas, I would say.
Yeah.
Where maybe fresh produce isn't necessarily the most, it doesn't necessarily work within your budget.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is get frozen foods. I don't necessarily recommend it all the time, but if frozen foods aren't even going to work for you, get canned vegetables. And, that way you're at least getting some nutrients, you're at least getting some minerals. It's not ideal, but it's better than just eating whatever's cheapest.
Right. Okay. So those are some recommendations. Good to know, because I do know people that are on a very tight budget, and shopping at Whole Foods and spending $400 a week on groceries is just simply not an option.
If I can actually give you an example just to speak to that for a moment, my wife and I had this conversation one day about how hard it is to eat healthy when you're on a budget.
It is harder, yes, for sure.
And I can appreciate that because I've worked in offices on like the south side of Chicago and predominantly middle class, lower class areas. So I understand the struggle that people go through with trying to do that. But I also say, if you're willing to do the work to see how you can budget it in and what you can afford that is healthy for you, I think you might surprise yourself. So what we did one day was we were going to get lunch, and we decided we were going to stop at this Whole Foods to get lunch. And it was right as we were having this conversation.
Okay.
So I challenged my wife. I said, okay, you know what? Let's go in there. Let's get something to eat for lunch from this Whole Foods. I can guarantee you that what I'm going to get is going to be healthier and less expensive than what you get. Because at the time, she and I were not eating the same way.
Okay.
So we go in there, and we both ended up getting something from the hot bar, the prepared meal bar.
Uh-huh.
I ended up getting a salad that was primarily kale, spinach, some garlic, red onions, things like that.
Okay.
I even put on some bacon bits on there.
Ooh.
So I wasn't like necessarily...
Real bacon or Bacos?
It was real bacon.
It was
bits,
real
from what I
bacon.
understand. So I wasn't necessarily depriving myself, and I was getting something that was loaded with vitamins and minerals, good stuff for me. She ended up getting something from the hot bar that ended up costing almost twice as much as what I spent, and I spent about $3.50 for a healthy meal. You can hardly even go to a McDonald's or a Burger King and get lunch for $3.50 anymore.
Usually, unless you're ordering off the dollar menu and you only get one thing, you're going to spend $6-7 at a fast food restaurant. Yeah. So.
And some people listening to this might say, like, well, a salad made of kale and what else did I say, spinach?
Spinach, yeah, isn't going to fill me up.
It's not going to fill me up. Well, again, if it's not filling you up, or if you feel like a couple hours later you're crashing, it's because, again, you are too dependent on sugar and insulin spikes to keep your energy levels elevated. That's really what you should be worried about. I'm not going to be filled up by the salad.
Yeah, that's actually, I was waiting for you guys to take a break from what you were saying to bring that up. But arguably, if you are eating the right foods, you are also going to eat less food, because you're definitely going to be more metabolically inclined to be able to use fats for energy, which are energy rich. So you think about it, fats versus carbohydrates, or even proteins. Fats have twice as much calories on a weight by weight basis, a little bit more than twice as much, and also just on a micronutrient level, you're going to be a lot better off. So you're not going to have those false hungers where you're calorically rich and nutrient poor. And unfortunately, it's in some places, like I used to work in Harvey. When I was working as a pharmacist, I did work in Harvey for about 2 years, and that place was a food desert. And that is actually the first time that I heard that term, food desert. And you definitely had to go out of your way to try to find something healthy in that neighborhood. But yeah, to come back to the point, it's not necessarily more expensive to eat healthy, but it may take some getting used to.
When you, a friend of mine is trying to go over healthier, and that's one of her concerns. Is, it's so expensive and this and that. And I told her that, when Hector, my husband, decided that he wanted to do paleo and primal, I had to completely change the way that I shopped and prepared food. So it's a transition, and it's not an easy transition. It does take some time, but I think it's worth it. So.
And for what it's worth, I've heard certain people argue that there are times when people think they are hungry or they feel hungry, and really what it is that they are one, either they're dehydrated or they are nutrient deficient in something, and if all they're doing is just packing in calories and like empty calories and processed foods, trying to satiate that hunger without getting the nutrients, it's never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I think we talked a lot about that, so that's cool. Okay. The next one is free range, which is a big buzzword and doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So
free range eggs, free range meat.
Yeah. So the idea of free range is a good idea, but unfortunately the term, it holds almost no meaning. And it could be because the animals that we're talking about, so I have notes here, it says it applies to eggs, poultry, beef, pork, sheep. And this could mean that the animal had access to free range, but not necessarily was pasture raised. So free range just meaning that it had access. So it may not have taken advantage of it. And also in cold weather, it's something where it might be better for the animal to have access to indoor shelter versus, it's free range, but it's under this environmental stressor, which will cause stress hormone release and decrease the nutritional value of the product that you are eating if you are eating that animal's flesh.
And free range is a slight step above cage free, which you see the terrible PETA videos and whatnot of the chickens. I'll just use chickens as a specific example, but shoved in their little cages and they can't go anywhere. Then there's cage free, where there's hundreds of chickens in a barn. They're not in a cage, but they're still all shoved together and they can't go anywhere. That's still cage free. Free range, they open the barn doors. And I did research on this when I worked for a company doing proprietary information about cleaning products and stuff, but a lot of the terminology, like all natural, doesn't mean anything either. Right. But they open the barn doors for, I think, 2 hours a day and give the chickens access to outdoors 2 hours a day. They can be considered free range.
Mm-hmm.
Pasture raised is when they actually are out in the pastures, wandering around, eating the bugs and eating the things, and those are the best eggs to get. Also the most expensive, but...
Yes. Yeah, so pastured is the term that you're looking for when you're shopping for eggs. And they are hard to come across. So you have to do a little bit of homework and legwork there.
Part of the reason I've also read that free range might not necessarily mean what people think it does is, again, you mentioned they get 2 hours a day, which is not really natural. But then the range that they're getting access to could very well just be a 10-foot by 10-foot concrete slab. Yeah. But they got the chance to be outdoors, so they're free range.
Yep. And a lot of this does go back to the idea of what we've touched on is factory farming. And as we're going through all these terms and talking about all these things, I know that both of you definitely recognize that there is a huge disparity between factory farmed meat and poultry and whatnot and small farm And even a lot of places in other countries don't do the factory farming like we do here. So,
Right.
and it definitely affects the quality of what you're eating. So,
For sure.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, you have to think also that factory farming is not a sustainable way to farm. So not only is it creating bad food products, but it is also destroying the environment that is being used for it. Monocropping, which is a term that can be used for either plants or animals, is not good for the environment. It's usually not good for the community that is involved with it either. So there are a whole bunch of issues with factory farming.
so there you go, vegetarians. Yes, we recognize that there is a difference and there are problems.
Yep. Got to eat responsibly.
Gotta eat responsibly, for sure.
All right, so we covered the free range.
Okay. Ooh, fresh. Next term.
Go for it.
What does that mean?
Fresh is another one of those terms that really doesn't mean anything. Go into the grocery store, look at the produce, and you'll see signs all over the place that are implying freshness. It's full of nutrients, full of vitamins. It's so healthy. It's great for you. And then look at the little stickers on the produce and see where it comes from.
Yeah.
If you're getting bananas that are coming from Guatemala
Guatemala, yeah.
No way in hell are they fresh. I don't know how long they would have been in transport, but there's no way that they are fresh, picked from the vine, if they're coming that far from another country.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and one of the other things, since we're talking about the transportation of, so when you're transporting produce, the active forms of vitamins can be depleted. So there are transformations of the conformation of like vitamin C and folate. So the nutritional value is definitely depleted, even if a product is considered to be fresh. So I think if something is to be considered fresh, it cannot be frozen. But in reality, let's say that you were to freeze that same product, so maybe not a banana, but because it'll just become mushy. But yeah, if you froze a product like green beans and transported it, you would actually have a better nutritional value than if you tried to transport it over a long distance and not freeze it for it to have that fresh label on it. So yeah, because something is fresh doesn't necessarily mean that it is better.
So you used a lot of long, complicated words at the beginning of that statement. What you're saying is things lose nutritional value if they ripen on a truck versus on the plant? That's what I gathered from it?
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
So the closer you can get it to like off of the plant itself, getting picked, the better it is going to be nutritionally, unless it's underripe. But I mean, there's nutritional value to be argued about that also. You know, like a green banana versus a yellow banana, because the glycemic load of that will be lower, just because of the changes in carbohydrate that happen as something is being ripened. It's changed more to simple sugars rather than starches, and it's going to hit your body a little bit harder as far as the insulin response. But from a vitamin standpoint, yeah, there can definitely be, and not just vitamins but minerals also. They can change the active forms and make it so that you're getting something that is not as useful to you nutritionally as far as bioavailability and usage of.
Okay, so I guess basically if you have access to a farmer's market, that's probably your best bet. Otherwise, buy things that can be grown locally. I know I keep bringing up Whole Foods only because that's where I do the majority of my shopping, but organic versus conventional, we're in Illinois, if they have conventional apples grown in Michigan, I will still buy those over organic apples grown in California, because buying local is better, and it's better for the environment as far as transportation and all of that good stuff.
Yep.
And buy in season. You're going to get the most nutritionally sound produce if it is currently in season, and they taste better. Berries taste better in the spring. Apples and pears taste better in the fall. A pineapple tastes better in the winter, and that's because even though we can access these things year round now because the world is so much smaller than it used to be, we just have access to stuff. It's always going to taste better when it's in season.
I look at that as being in the category of things that are, miracles of technology, that we can have certain produce all year round that's really not meant to be there all year round because it only grows during a certain season. But, we can make it happen with technology. And the fact of the matter is, there are reasons that there are seasons to certain things. And yeah, when you get things in season that are fresh, locally grown, or as close to it as possible, they are going to have a higher nutrient density than things that are just, you're eating it in winter and it only grows in the spring,
Right. Yeah, berries. I brought some berries for Christmas morning dinner, and they don't really taste like that much.
Yeah.
But they were pretty, so I bought them. And I know better. Yeah. And yeah, that's why, fall flavors, spring flavors, there's something to be said for that. They taste better during those seasons. So, in my opinion, as a foodie.
Going along with that also, as far as fresh and flavors, there's another conversation I was having recently. Real food is supposed to have flavor to it.
Yes.
There's supposed to be things that are bitter. There are things that are sweet. There are things that are unctuous. It's supposed to have an actual flavor to it. And if you eat enough processed food, well, let's say you go away from eating processed food for a while. Let's say for 3 months straight, you just decide I'm going strict paleo. I'm eating like all healthy food, all organic food. And then you go back and you eat something from a fast food place, you're going to realize it really tastes like nothing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things
just a salty, sugary mush in your mouth.
That I just don't like anymore. Those things that used to taste so good to me just don't anymore.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why when you go away from it and you come back and it tastes different, it's because your body, your nervous system, had the time to reset and realize, oh, this is garbage. I shouldn't be eating this. It tastes like nothing. And all it does is stimulate the reward centers for sugar and salt and that kind of thing.
Another fun thing about buying things in season, Mother Nature is brilliant. She gives us what we need. There is a reason that things that are high in vitamin C and whatnot are available during the winter. That's when they're in season. And berries in the spring and whatnot. So a lot of times when your body needs a certain nutrition, and things like squashes and whatnot that can sit all winter without spoiling. Great to have if you were back in the day and weren't able to store food in freezers and refrigerators. We are now. You could get through the winter with a lot of these root vegetables.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
So, yeah, it's funny how that works.
All right, so let's move on to our next term, which is...
Sorry. This is a big one for a lot of people that I know. Gluten-free. Because gluten is bad, okay?
This is a loaded term because you can slap this on something that never had gluten in it to begin with. Yeah. So like gluten-free apples.
And I've seen gluten-free apples and gluten-free nuts and
gluten-free canola oil.
Yeah, so
which is horrible for a multitude of reasons.
So the gluten-free, it's a term that is tossed around uselessly a lot of the time. But let's put that aside. All right, so yeah, there's never gluten in an apple, and there's jokes about that kind of stuff. But let's just say foods that are gluten-free.
Gluten-free bread.
Yeah, so gluten-free bread, gluten-free pasta, stuff like that, where it is a product that natively or originally, because those are both processed products, had gluten in them. So if you are somebody who's gluten sensitive, whether it be just to a small extent or you have like full-blown celiac, where it's life-threatening, I would say you really shouldn't be trying to find a product that is a gluten-free representation of something that you just think that you enjoy or like to have. But that's me, and I'm a very sort of black and white individual. It's like if it's not good for you, you probably just shouldn't have it. And also, I'm not a huge fan of bread or pasta. Like I don't really miss those things other than like bread with my pizza.
I was going to say, Hector is saying this as someone who has tried at least 8 iterations of paleo pizza crust or primal pizza crust so that he can have his pizza.
Yeah, but the more the more time passes, the less I have pizza. And I think the last time I had it was when we went to Paisan's. But anyway, that was months ago. And yeah, I talk about like, oh man, I want some pizza, but I don't actually go and get pizza a lot anymore. So anyway, I'll open that up to you guys. What do you guys have to say about gluten-free?
Gluten-free to me kind of falls in similar categories like the low-fat and the fat-free options, for the simple fact that, again, when they take the gluten out, they have to replace it with something. And a lot of times you'll see that it's replaced with things like tapioca starch or coconut flour, things like that. They're not necessarily bad per se, but again, they're not foods that you should be making a regular part of your diet because they, again, have effects on blood sugar levels, insulin levels. There are people who are celiac, and for sure they need to avoid gluten as much as possible because they have allergic reactions to it. But there is also such a thing as non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which I've seen people argue about on Facebook, on social media, saying that that's a lie, that's a myth. There are peer-reviewed, published studies saying that no, non-celiac gluten sensitivity is a real thing. There are certain people who are not technically celiac patients, but they still have an aversion to gluten and other proteins and other proteins in bread and grain products. So gluten-free in general, to me, it's just like, okay, maybe you just shouldn't be having that food in general and moving on to something else instead of trying to find something that's a
gluten-free version of something you probably shouldn't be eating in the first place,
like
a cupcake.
Yeah, exactly right. And I look at it the same way as like things like, people slap like the paleo label on a lot of different like breads and cookies and things like that, which they may technically be made from paleo ingredients, but you still shouldn't be trying to make cookies and cake a regular part of your diet.
My opinion on paleo baked goods is they're all bullshit. If you want to occasionally have a cupcake because it's your birthday or whatever, just have a real cupcake. Just eat the thing and then don't go crazy with it, but everything in moderation, as opposed to, then you'll end up eating 6 paleo cupcakes because they don't taste as good, and you're trying to feed that craving that you're not satisfying if you had just eaten 1 or 2 bites of the real decadent thing.
Yeah. Or sometimes
that's how I do it anyway.
Sometimes you really do just like that paleo whatever. It could be a paleo pancake, it could be a paleo cookie, could be like a paleo banana bread, whatever it is. If you're eating that with the intention of being healthier, let's say that you have the standard American diet where you're eating, takeout and McDonald's most of your meals, that's going to be better for you. But if you are somebody who eats paleo or primal and you're pretty strict with it, but you're eating a lot of that, you're still carbohydrate loading. And if you don't have the caloric need, like you were not a performance athlete, you don't need that level of carbohydrate or anything like that, then you are still you can still have too much carbohydrate in your paleo diet. So that's another thing to consider. But that's gluten, right? Anything else about gluten?
Not really.
No? All right, let's move on to the next one.
The 2 different spellings here, and that's always something that kind of made me laugh. Light, L-I-G-H-T. Light, L-I-T-E, because you know it's good if it's spelled incorrectly. And diet.
Yeah, so stuff like, I have my examples here, like Coors Light, or
Miller Lite,
Spam Light, or Light Lays, or let's say like Diet Mountain Dew. Stuff like that where something is supposed to make it sound like it's not as bad as the original product. But it's like, why have that product if it's not optimal anyway? And if it's these garbage products that I just mentioned, does that even sound like something that you want? I know some people like Coors Light, but that's another issue.
You also, to be fair, before you started learning about nutrition several years ago, I met my husband because we both worked at the same Walgreens, where he was a pharmacist and I worked in the photo department. I would talk to him every day when he came to purchase his light Code or Diet Code Red Mountain Dew from me.
That's accurate.
Every day.
We've come a long way since then. But I mean that is something where at that point I did not know the extent to which diet could affect your health, and so yes, I was trying to avoid the sugar calories, but I was having what I think aspartame is the artificial sweetener that is in Code Red Mountain Dew. But I mean it's really just a bunch of, and I don't really like using the word chemicals because everything is a chemical. So saying, oh, you're just eating chemicals is not really anything. But
I know some food scientists that would agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, chemical is All right, let's not talk about that. But anyway, yeah, Diet Mountain Dew or Code Red Mountain Dew is just not something that you should be having in your diet because there's nothing good about it for you. And it can cause issues. There's disruption of your gut microbiome, and then your body has to filter out all these things that you're putting into it. So just think about, like, since we're talking about Mountain Dew, something that is that bright blue doesn't really exist in nature for you to be eating. And it has been shown that certain food colorings can cause kidney issues. And usually, it's generally considered safe by the FDA, but that means that you can drink it one time and you'll be okay. But if you drink that every day, like I used to, that could be an issue. So there's that also.
Certain food colorings have also been found to be carcinogenic. So it's, again, if you're somebody who likes drinking a 12-pack of something every day, which I've known people who do that. They drink a 12-pack of soda every day, and it's just...
Or a whole 2-liter bottle or something, yeah.
Yeah, it's just
or
horrible.
Multiple 2-liter bottles.
Yeah, I'm getting sick just thinking about that.
Again, with the whole light tea diet conversation, there's really no such thing as a free lunch. If you're going to take out the sugar or the alcohol, whatever it was, they're going to have to replace it with something else. And if they're replacing it with an artificial sweetener, it's going to cause you gut dysbiosis, where your gut microbiome is being all disrupted, and that can actually contribute to obesity, diabetes, mental health issues. Well, then what benefit of there really was there of getting the light version of anything?
No benefit. Except the American Heart Association told you should.
Yeah. What's funny is today was actually the first time I actually Googled how do you make light beer in preparation for this conversation.
Oh, yeah?
I had never learned how it was made before. Now that I know, I'm like, yeah, it just sounds even worse. Basically, what ends up happening is, see if I can remember how they talked about this. They add enzymes to help digest the carbohydrates in the beer to help bring down the carbohydrate content.
Okay.
But it actually ends up producing more alcohol.
Ooh.
So you get a higher ABV in your beer, but you can't have that. You still have to keep it in a certain range, 5 to 6, whatever it's going to be. So in order to temper that, they add in more water. And that's why it's viewed as, people who drink regular, supposedly real beer don't like light beer because of how watered down it is.
Because it actually is.
It's literally watered down because they have to keep the alcohol content within a certain range, because getting it to that light status gives it a higher alcohol content. I'd never known that before.
Yeah, and there are, without getting into a long conversation, there are definitely beers out there that have like a 10%, 11% ABV. So is that just, why do certain ones like light beers have to keep within that like 5% or whatever?
I have no idea.
Because I know both of you drink some craft beers that have a lot higher alcohol content to them.
I can only assume there's some kind of government regulation that says if you're going to be classified as light, you have to fall within a certain ABV and a certain level of calories. That would be my guess.
I didn't know that it was ABV, but I would assume that there's some sort of caloric sort of threshold, and I just because of what alcohol is, it would contribute to those calories. Yeah. But I don't know.
I'd actually always heard that Guinness is a naturally light beer, but because that's not their brand, that's not their style, they don't market it that way.
And Guinness is a dark beer.
Yeah.
So.
Not that Guinness is good for you. That's also got its own problems with the sweeteners that are in there, but that's a different story.
Yeah, just beer's not good for you. It's delicious, and we all drink it sometimes, but it's not good for you.
For sure.
All right. Locally sourced. Since I brought this up earlier, as far as farmers markets and whatnot, locally sourced.
Yeah, so just because something is grown around the corner doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for you. So just an example, let's say that you live near a soy farm, or you live near a concentrated animal feed organization. So those products are in your neighborhood, but they're products that just by nature are not good for you. So locally sourced, yes, it is important, but there's context. So, yes.
You can find, excuse me, you can find aerial shots of farms, concentrated animal feed organizations. You look at aerial shots of that, you can see what it does to the environment immediately surrounding the facility.
Especially the water.
Yeah, which gives you a very, very obvious picture about how well it's going to do for the environment. So having that close to you isn't necessarily a good thing.
So, if something is locally sourced, I guess, and you're unsure of still its quality, if it is near you, maybe just go take a little drive over there, or take a walk over there and visit the farm, see what it looks like.
Yeah.
That way you know for sure you've seen it with your own eyes.
Actually, I'll mention, since you just mentioned that, so the place that we get our meat from, which is Walnut Acres Family Farm in Illinois, they invite people to come and check out their farm. So if you are really interested in checking out the quality of the produce that you are getting, you may actually want to visit the farm. A lot of times at farmers markets, you get to talk directly to the farmer, and a lot of times they'll have an album of like pictures of what's going on at their farm.
The place that I used to go before we went with Walnut Acres, they had their album, and I talked to the people that owned the farm, and
so I'd say now, I don't know, somebody might create a fake album, but
they might, they definitely might, based on, and once you get used to what corn-fed and conventionally raised meat tastes like versus pasture-raised meat and pasture-raised eggs, you can tell if they're full of crap. Both the food full of crap and the farm is full of crap. If they just brought an album that wasn't actually their farm, you can tell a difference.
That is true.
So
there's definitely a different, let's call it quality of taste to them. So pasture-raised animals are gonna taste more gamey, and their products are going to be gamier.
I think a lot of people, you've seen eggs in particular, the pictures online, the conventionally farm-raised egg with the really pale yolks versus the pasture-raised egg with the really dark yolk. So
and the viscosity of the egg white will change also.
And grass-fed beef will taste, for lack of a better word, gamier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a really funny, or I thought it was a funny experience at a farmer's market one time. There was a guy there. For the most part, from my experience at farmers markets and trade shows, if you meet the people who are growing these foods, they're usually pretty happy to talk about it. They'd love to answer your questions. Like, this is all assuming they're telling you the truth, but most of the time they're pretty open and honest about what they've got going on. I met this guy at one farmer's market, and he was just doing a beautiful pitch telling me about his beef and how healthy it is, grass-fed, all this stuff. Sounds amazing. The pictures in his album are fantastic. He's giving me this pitch. It's going on for like 3 solid minutes. I'm sold. I'm ready to buy. And then right at the very end, he goes, and then for the last 30 days, we corn finish it to seal in that flavor. I'm like, you just ruined the entire rest of the pitch.
That directly relates to this adorable couple that I met at a farmer's market who were talking about the price. Like, this couple is like, if you picture an adorable Midwestern farm couple, they're in their 60s or whatever, like you would picture these two people.
Not American Gothic?
American Gothic, but cuter, because American Gothic is a little scary to me, honestly. But, and he actually was saying that I know that my prices are a little bit more expensive, but, and he said, I was trying to figure out, like, how are these other farmers selling for, $3 less a pound or whatever than I am? How are they able to afford to do that? It's that 30 days.
Yeah.
He's like, my animals, absolutely no corn feed whatsoever. They are 100% grass-fed. So, and that was something that I didn't know, that it could still be labeled grass-fed up to as long as you do it for like 95% of their life or whatever.
And what's really sad about that is I've read in certain sources that you could have an animal that you raise, let's say it's raised until 6 years old before it's slaughtered for the market. You feed it for 5 years, 11 months, grass-fed. Everything's great. But then that last 30 days you corn finish it, you can actually significantly change the nutritional value of that animal's meat in that last 30 days. So you did all the right stuff for 5 years, 11 months. That last 30 days basically has ruined it. So it's no longer worth what 100% grass-fed meat is.
Yeah, so and that's I don't know if grass-fed is on your list, but apparently you need to look for 100% grass-fed, finished.
Yep. Yeah, so since you're mentioning that, think about if you can do that to an animal, you can do that to yourself.
Yep.
So if you're...
Just like it's the holidays right now, and for those of us that eat healthy most of the time, come January 2nd, the average person gains like 10 pounds over the holidays because we eat whatever and enjoy our cookies and cakes and all the things. And yeah.
Kind of going along with that, there was a really interesting study published recently. We can move on to the next point here in just a second. But this study looked at people who were on a ketogenic diet versus people who were on the standard American diet. And the difference between them was not only the diet, but the ketogenic people were actually asked not to exercise for the duration of this study. The people on the standard American diet were allowed to exercise, and the people on the ketogenic got far better metabolic and cardiovascular changes than the people who were allowed to exercise but were still eating the standard American diet, which kind of gives weight to that motto that you can't out-train a bad diet. If you're eating like garbage, it doesn't matter how much you're exercising.
I would say one variable that I'd want to look at from that, I do agree with that, but one variable that I'd want to look at would be what kind of workout were they doing? Were they doing cardio, or were they doing resistance training, or whatever it was? But
Sure.
But I would like to know what that was also. That would be another variable that I'd be interested in. All right.
All right. Next bullet point here is made with real fruits, vegetables, made with olive oil, avocado. Basically, made with is sort of the buzz for this one, I think. And then insert healthy thing afterwards.
Yes. So I'll let you comment on that first.
Are you gesturing to me?
Either one of you.
Okay. Well, for me personally, I found that made with doesn't mean anything, only because, for instance, mayonnaise. I was looking for a healthier mayonnaise, a paleo mayonnaise, which does exist now, but made with olive oil. Turned it around, looked at the ingredients. Any packaged product, read the ingredients. That's number one tip that I can offer anyone. First ingredient, vegetable oil. Read all the soy lecithin and all the things, and the very last ingredient was olive oil. Yeah. So basically, they can add 2 drops of olive oil, and they can say that it's made with olive oil. And that is with anything, really.
Yeah, again, food manufacturers, they are so clever. I mean, they've literally got this down to a science, how to trigger people's brains to want to buy their products and trick them into thinking that something is healthy. When it says made with olive oil, like the example you just gave, you'd probably be better off just eating a spoonful of olive oil and not buying that product.
Yep. And not only that, but so let's talk about the quality of the olive oil that's going in there also, or avocado oil, whatever it may be. So one example that I can think of is I saw some Pam that was
they make Pam with olive oil.
Yeah. So I picked that up and like, oh, Pam with olive oil? Interesting. So I picked it up, and like the avocado oil or olive oil, whatever I was talking about, was the last ingredient. But then also, I didn't investigate this any further, but then also think like, if you're getting olive oil, you want to get, extra virgin cold pressed so that you don't make the fat rancid and oxidize it. And I doubt that is being observed when they're just adding a little bit of it into something like Pam, which I don't even remember what kind of fat Pam is, but I'm sure it's something.
I think
atrocious.
It's usually canola. I think.
Yeah, it's usually canola, from what I understand. And actually, something important to bring up with this, since we're discussing it, is when you are looking at labels for people that don't know, the first 3 ingredients you read on a food label are generally the most important because they are primarily what is in that product. There could be 20 other products or 20 other things listed on that label. The first 3 are the bulk of it, and that's what's really most important.
It goes in ascending order. So the first thing listed on the label will be the number 1 ingredient in that, and the last thing listed is the least amount, which is why olive oil being in the made with olive oil was such a bullshit, basically.
And going back to the animal example we were using with dog food, if the first ingredient on that dog food label isn't some kind of meat, it's probably not something you want to buy if you're looking for quality.
And, I mean, toaster pastries are made with real fruit.
Yep.
It says it on made with real fruit.
Fruit roll-ups
because
are made with real fruit.
They're made with, there's some real fruit in there. It started out as fruit once upon a time.
Yep.
And I don't know if they still are. I think they actually had to stop doing it, but I know at one time, I'm trying not to say brand names here, but there was a canned ravioli brand that most of us are aware of that used to advertise they had 1 or 2 like whole servings of vegetables because of the tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're living in a time when a pizza was classified as a fruit, so...
Ooh.
Yes.
Well, and that's made with real fruits and vegetables.
Sure.
And as a health coach, I've had a client in particular that thought that ketchup was a serving of vegetable.
And at one time, it probably was advertised as such because it has tomatoes in it.
Yep.
And actually, they fortify ketchup or certain ketchups now with lycopene.
Ooh.
Does anybody even know what lycopene does?
Lycopene is already in tomatoes, and tomatoes are a good source of lycopene.
There you go.
So if you're fortifying something with lycopene, that means, as we discussed earlier, they took it out and then put it back in for some stupid
They're going to
reason.
give you back 50% of what was in there, and they're going to charge you more for it.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so there's that made with. Our next one.
Okay, multigrain, whole grain, natural in quotation marks, and right next to it you have Cheetos written.
This is supposed to be two separate ones, so we'll start with the
sorry.
multigrain whole grain. Yeah, so let's talk about, I guess, grains. So multigrain or whole grain.
Well, that's the American Heart Association again telling us that we should be eating these things because they're good for us.
that's
And the
part
food
of it.
pyramid, the old food pyramid.
All right, so let's talk about grains. So grains, they're supposed to be very nutrient dense. They're supposed to be so great for us. But the biggest problem with grains is that in their natural state, so let's just talk about if you're in a field and you're trying to eat grain, you can't digest it. Those things that are in there are just not bioavailable to you. So there's that, and then there's also, well, now that you can't just eat it straight up, it has to be processed. So even if you have something that is whole grain, so let's say they did not remove anything from the grain, so they're giving you everything that is in the grain. So grains have phytates and lectins in them, which are basically their defense mechanisms. So plants have evolved to try to protect themselves so they can propagate their species also, just like any animal has. So they use chemical warfare. Phytates and lectins are things that cause animals issues and can also, not only will they cause you issues, so you're introducing foreign proteins to your body, which your body responds to, and this is something that has been becoming controversial also as far as protein reactivity across species. But then there's also stuff like the phytates, which will actually cause a net loss of nutrients. So let's talk about like if you're talking about minerals that are in there, you can actually have a net loss of minerals from these things going through your digestive tract because they will bind them. You'll secrete minerals in an effort to digest these things. They'll get bound in your digestive tract, and then you'll pass them. So you'll actually lose this. So if we're talking about grains, you have to consider that as far as nutritional value, and that is aside from talking about any sensitivities you might have to the proteins that come along with those grains.
So basically what you're saying is if you ingest these things, not only will they not add nutrients to your body, but they will strip your body of the nutrients you already had. In short.
And this is a problem that is especially bad in the U.S. So I don't know if I'm sure that you guys have heard of this, but maybe some of our listeners haven't. But let's say that you have pasta here and you have pasta in Italy.
This is something you and I just talked about the other day, actually.
Yeah. Or even pizza. Let's just talking about bread. All right, so bread or pasta. You have them here, you have them in another country, like Italy. They have different species of grains that they use for their products, which actually are much better tolerated by a lot of people. So let me open that up to you guys.
The reason it came up is I believe one of your box clients, your gym clients, talked about her mother bringing pasta from Argentina or something like that.
It was Argentina. Yep.
Okay, from Argentina, and how that did not affect her the way American pasta affected her. And I talked about like when we were on our honeymoon, we went to Italy for 2 weeks, and how we were on our honeymoon, so I didn't pay any attention to what I was eating at the time, and we were in Italy, so I was eating pizza and pasta and all the things, and I still, when I came back from this honeymoon where I had not paid any attention to what I was eating, multiple people actually asked me like, oh my gosh, how much weight have you lost? And like, I apparently...
Did you lose like a lot of weight?
Yeah, someone actually said, did you lose like a lot of weight? And I was not heavy by any means when we left. Like, I'd been watching what I was eating and working out regularly because it was my wedding and that's what we do. But yeah, so apparently it didn't affect me, and I never did feel that bloated feeling. And what I get now is I do still love bread and pasta, but it definitely... I can tell that it affects my body. I get bloated, I get puffy, and I did not have that issue there. So, Maybe it was the Mediterranean air, or maybe it was that they don't put crap in their food.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of going along with that. Like I was actually somebody who really bought into the whole idea of whole grains and multigrains being healthier. Even as I was going through college and into my doctorate, I was still buying whole wheat bread. I was still buying whole grain bagels, multigrain bagels, thinking that I was doing something good for myself and giving myself good quality energy. And when you start looking into it and reading about it, as Hector was saying, you know, grains are not tigers, you know, they're not dogs. They can't defend themselves physically by attacking what's coming after them to eat them. So what they have to do is they have to develop this chemical warfare that does damage to you when you're eating it. And there is also the fact that, as you said, we process things differently here in the U.S. We use different strains of grains and wheat that affect people differently, unfortunately for the worst in a lot of cases. And when you're eating the whole grain as opposed to the white bread or something that's been more thoroughly processed, you are actually getting more of those proteins, the chemical warfare that does damage to your intestine, can contribute towards allergies, autoimmune issues. And so you think you're doing something healthy for yourself, but really all you're doing is hurting your body even more, making it so your body has to try even harder to keep you healthier.
And that directly contradicts what pretty much probably all of our listeners have heard.
Yeah. And there's also, going along with that, people think multigrain, whole grain for fiber. You know,
right.
It's been widely assumed that if you don't have enough fiber in your diet, it's going to disrupt your digestion, cause constipation, hemorrhoids. You know, it could get to things like anal bleeding and fissures because of how poorly you're able to eliminate things from your intestine.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually looking at a really interesting study, a couple interesting studies last week that showed that people who actually completely eliminated fiber from their diet for 2 weeks and then selected not to get back on it, eliminated their constipation, eliminated their hemorrhoids, eliminated their digestive issues. They actually found that putting people on a no-fiber diet or a no-grain diet was better for their diverticulitis or diverticulosis than continuing to do that. So again, it's just this idea has permeated society that fiber grains are good for you. Research doesn't really support that idea for a lot of different reasons.
Yep. So, were you going to add something, Hector? I had a question, but
I was just going to say that I have heard that also, but also just from personal experience. I one time, I think it was within the past year, I just decided I was going to try to up my fiber. I didn't have any issues, but just by trying to increase my fiber, and this isn't grains either because I wasn't eating grains, but just trying to increase my fiber actually caused me more issues than just eating the way that I normally would. That's all I wanted to add. Go ahead.
Okay, so that answers my question a little bit because, Dan, when you were talking, you sort of lumped in fiber and grains as all one thing, which it's not. So even fiber from fruits and vegetables can cause you distress? Because that's where I would think that you would want to get, like leafy greens is where I get the majority of my fiber.
Okay, so to go back to one of the studies I was mentioning about how they had people eliminate. So basically what happened in this study was they took a group of people, and for 2 weeks they had all these people completely eliminate fiber from their diet. Now the way they qualified fiber, they were looking at vegetables, they were looking at fruit, they were looking at grains, rice. I think that's what they were looking at as a whole with fiber. Then after the 2 week period where all these people completely eliminated fiber from their diet, they gave them the choice. You can either continue to stay off of it, you can have moderate levels of it, or you can go back to a high fiber diet. And it's the people who went back on a high fiber diet that had their constipation, all these issues start to come back on them. Now, when I look at that, I think, okay, and for vegans, actually, they had vegans and vegetarians in this study. For them, when they put them on the no fiber diet, what they had them do was they had them eat refined grains and refined rice.
Okay.
So they were still allowed to eat those things because it was just assumed that was the majority of their diet.
Right.
But they had to eat the more refined ones that had less of the proteins and the grains in them.
Also, if you're vegetarian and vegan and suddenly you can't eat fruits and vegetables, you die.
Right. So the way I would temper this is, or the way I would find like a compromise is, I would say, okay, you do need vegetables, you do need fruit because you need the micronutrients that go along with them, the phytonutrients. And this is actually something that gets into a more complex conversation as far as, when you're eating a plant and you think, well, I'm going to eat this because it's got magnesium in it, or I'm going to eat this because it's got vitamin C in it, you're missing the point that plant really has a whole complex of nutrients in it that you might need beyond just this vitamin, that vitamin, or the fiber. It's really all the things together that you need. So I would say if you're trying to look and say, okay, well, I want to eliminate fiber, don't do it by eliminating fruits and vegetables. Do it by eliminating grains and rice and all these other things.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So it was a roundabout way of saying, like, keep the fruits and vegetables, get rid of the grains and the wheats as much as possible.
More vegetables than fruits.
Yeah, I would agree.
Another thing that we didn't talk about yet as far as so we're talking about multigrains, whole grains. So if we refine the grains, so let's talk about like bread, pasta, cereal. These are all refined grain products. Once you refine them, they basically get treated by your body as sugar. Whether they are whole grain, multigrain, whatever it is, you've broken it down so that you have simple sugars that are exposed to your body. And even though they don't taste sweet, they have a high glycemic index when you eat them. So that means you're going to raise your blood sugar quickly. You're going to have an insulin response. You're going to be telling your body to store these calories as fat. So there's that also. So put aside that you may not have the bioavailability of the nutrition that is supposed to come along with them. You are going to have problems with the proteins that are being introduced that can be bioreactive to you. And then you're also going to have the high glycemic load that is going to be hitting your system. Yeah. So this is, and not everybody is as sensitive to grain, so this isn't a blanket statement, but these are definitely things to consider if you are going to have grains in your diet.
Yeah, I know that you, Hector, have more sensitivities than I do. Like, I don't have an issue with rice or with corn at all, and that corn especially will make you really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm fine with rice. Rice doesn't really cause me issues, but corn...
Wheat, I can tell a difference. Like I said, I get bloated and gassy and all the things, but...
And wheat also, like I legitimately had rheumatoid arthritis going on when I had wheat in my diet. I had, you could see like bony nodules that were starting to form that went away when I took that out of my diet, especially on my hands. But yeah, I mean, you can have autoimmune diseases that are triggered by these proteins, such as rheumatoid arthritis. And that's just one of them. I mean, you can have allergies that are enhanced. You can have all kinds of issues because your immune system is botched. So those are just a couple of examples.
And things that you may not notice that are a problem until you remove them from your diet. You just think that that's just how you feel.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually went through a similar experience. This is actually when I was in my doctorate and I was still eating whole grain pasta, whole grain bread, things like that, and thinking that I was doing something healthy for myself. I had pain that would just sometimes just really hurt in my wrists and my shoulders and my neck, occasionally in my knees, and I wouldn't go as far as saying that I thought I had rheumatoid arthritis, but I just thought I had arthritis. At the time, I just thought it was a result of years of wrestling and grappling and weight training. I just thought this is just what happins. And I'm in my mid-20s when this is going on. I just think, okay, it's going to get worse from here, so I might as well just get used to it. Yeah. And the thing that really made a difference for me was when I decided to go paleo. And when I decided to go paleo, I did it really strict for the first 90 days. Yeah. I completely eliminated breads, grains, rice, everything that paleo tells you to go off of. I completely eliminated it. And after 30 days, well, actually less than 30 days, all of those joint pains that I had went away.
Well, there you go.
And I was actually able to work out harder. I was able to lift more, and I didn't have the pains that I had before. And it really struck a chord for me that, damn, all these things that I thought were a result of just wear and tear on my joints was actually all the inflammation I had in my body from those poor dietary choices.
Yeah. So that's a combination. So not only do we have the reactive proteins that we're being exposed to, that we're continuously exposing ourselves to, and that's why people think this is just part of our normal aging process, is just because everybody is not everybody, but a large percentage of people have this exposure that they it's been normalized. So everybody's getting it around them. This is part of our environment, and our food is part of our environment. So it's sort of accepted as the norm now. So pair that with the glycemic load that we were talking about, and sugar causes inflammation also. So you got two things going on there that are not helping your health. And I was exactly the same way. Recovery from workouts got better. I was actually able to lose stubborn body fat that I wasn't able to before, that I kind of just accepted as, well, this is my genetics. Now, several years later, I'm a lot better off physically. And this is, like a decade after we're talking about this change, really, because this was about a decade ago that this stuff started happening. All right, so let's move on to our next term.
All right, so can I do all these at once, or?
Well, we're going to just start with this one. Just
natural, and in parentheses, Cheetos, because there are natural Cheetos. I've seen them. Natural, made with organic cheese, macaroni and cheese. They sell that at Whole Foods. It's Annie's brand.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, so you can have a natural combination of stuff that is just not right.
Do we even know how do they define natural?
No.
For this term? Okay, because I was going to say I don't believe there actually is a definition for putting natural or all natural on a food product, which it means nothing.
Food, I don't know. Cleaning products is what I was doing the proprietary research on, and it had to have like something stupid, like 3% of its ingredients derived naturally, and they could put natural on the label.
Yeah, so
this was a long time ago. It may have changed, but
there is an FDA definition of natural, and but you can still have chemical processes that go along the way that introduce byproducts that are not things that are naturally occurring in the foods. So again, I don't like to use, just throw out the word chemical because that really doesn't mean anything. But
artificial maybe is a better word than just straight up chemical,
I guess. But yeah, whatever it is, the reactions that are going through are transforming it from the natural form and making it something that is not necessarily good for you. Also, something can be perfectly natural and also not good for you. Again, going back to sort of like the grain things with like phytates, lectins, proteins, phytoestrogens, all kinds of things that can affect your chemistry that do occur naturally, but just our bodies aren't meant to deal with them. They're toxins that occur naturally, and it's not something you want to expose yourself to. So yeah, the term natural is kind of not really helpful when it comes to finding out stuff that is good to eat for you.
Hey, even if you don't believe in all of the stuff that we're saying about grains, think about anytime you cook and the recipe calls for a bay leaf. You take out the bay leaf and you throw it away. Bay leaf is natural. It's a leaf, but if you eat it, it'll make you ill.
Yep.
So there are definitely natural things that you shouldn't be eating.
You can also kind of think of it as, would you ever expect to see a Cheeto out in nature?
A Cheeto, I kind of want to see a Cheeto field now.
Yeah, a Cheeto in its natural habitat.
But
Cheetos are disgusting, and I kind of like them.
all right, so I guess we can go past the natural, and our next term is...
We got no cholesterol.
Yeah, so these are grouped together. So just an exclusion. So let's talk about no.
No cholesterol, no trans fat, no preservatives, there's that word artificial, no artificial flavor, and non-GMO. Non-GMO is a great big one now.
Yeah. So just because something is excluded doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be better for you. So like let's talk about like no cholesterol. This could be what was the original thing that we were talking about where it was gluten. So like gluten free. So just because something is gluten free or just because it has no cholesterol, it might not have had cholesterol to begin with. Also, cholesterol isn't bad for you. So but if we're talking about like no trans fats are not allowed to be used in the US anymore. So that's kind of not... You might still see it on labels, but you should just assume that stuff just doesn't have trans fats anymore. Fat. Yeah. No preservatives. So, if you're not preserving, let's say a grain product again. So, you have a pasta with no preservatives. It's still something that can cause you issues. No artificial flavors. So, again, with the pasta or something like that, a grain
toaster
product.
Pastries made with real fruit.
Yeah. But yeah, just because you leave out one thing that is bad doesn't necessarily mean that you are putting stuff into yourself that is good for you.
Yeah, most of the time that thing that they put on the label is, no cholesterol, no trans fat, whatever the no is, it's just kind of the sacrificial lamb, the buzzword that it looks good, so everything else in there must be acceptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with any of these labels if it says no this, no that. It's not. We're not saying that if it says no artificial flavors, then the product is crap. It just means that doesn't mean that the product is healthy.
Yeah.
It could just mean nothing.
Yeah, it literally could just mean nothing.
A lot of times it does mean nothing, like a gluten-free apple.
Yes.
Or a cholesterol-free apple. So let's take a moment to talk about non-GMO. So yes, you probably do want to be looking for non-GMO products when you're searching for your produce, but just because something is non-GMO doesn't necessarily mean that it was raised or farmed sustainably. So if you have a non-GMO monocrop, so monocrops, where you just have one field full of one thing, there's no biodiversity. So you're basically robbing the soil. You're not replacing stuff unless you're doing it artificially a lot of times. If there's no crop rotation, so you're depleting the soil of nutrients. Think about like you're growing these plants. They need nutrients to grow and to flourish. But if you don't replace them, and if you're not replacing them naturally, you are damaging the ecosystem there. So there's that also.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on non-GMO, or is that pretty much it?
I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one.
All right. Oh, wow. For anyone under the age of probably 30 listening to this podcast, you may not even know what this is. But Olestra, which was a huge thing in, I think, the early 90s, things with Olestra.
Was it the early 90s? Was it that long ago?
Yes. I was a kid, and I remember Olestra was giving people diarrhea.
Yeah.
That was why they took it off the market. It gave people diarrhea.
It's just like just about every late-night variety show had a sketch about Olestra causing anal leakage.
Yep.
So I believe that it was also found to be a carcinogen. But yeah, I mean, if you're... any oil that you cannot digest, any fat that you cannot digest is going to pass through your digestive. So think about like using mineral oil as a laxative or something like that. But not only that, but it's let's say that you have that along with food, like even real food. The fat-soluble vitamins can get locked into that fat, whatever it is, and can just be washed through you. So you'll get malabsorption of micronutrients also. So yeah, something like Olestra, where it was like, okay, now we're trying to take a non-nutritive fat to replace, just a fat, and not necessarily a good fat, because if you're taking out canola oil and replacing it with Olestra, that's not really better. But if we're trying to replace foods in general, if we're trying to replace our healthy fats, so if we're talking about like butter or bacon fat or ghee, lard, whatever it is, and you're putting an artificial fat in there, again, with the malabsorption of the fat-soluble vitamins and the potential loss of fat-soluble vitamins that are secreted into your digestive tract when you are attempting to digest foods, and you have that net loss. So there's all that.
Also, I think this is sort of irrelevant because I don't even think Olestra is legal.
Nope, it's no longer available in the U.S.
But yeah, aside from all of that science that you just spouted, people didn't like Olestra because you'd buy the bag of chips, and it was usually chips, and it would actually say, warning, may cause anal leakage.
Yes.
And that's why it got taken off the market, because people didn't want their butts dripping.
My wife and I have actually discussed, why would anybody knowingly and willingly buy a bag that says it's going to cause you anal leakage?
Well, people didn't know at first. It was advertised as a, again, low-fat option to fry chips in. I think I remember it being specifically for a couple brands of chips that used it, potato chips.
Let me tell you that it is something that is dumbfounding. I mean, this is one example, but also think about, there are fat blockers. So drugs that have been available in the U.S. market, Xenical, and which later came out as Ally over the counter, basically is a molecule that will bind fat. Mm-hmm. But it causes the same net issue. Now the fat is bound in your digestive tract and basically just makes your digestive tract a fat slide. So
fun.
Yeah, so same problem. You can have anal leakage because now you have all this fat that is trying to go through your digestive tract. But I mean, this is, as a pharmacist, this is something that I took issue with. A pharmacist and a health advocate. I feel like if you're introducing something that is contributing to your problem and just trying to mitigate it by adding another thing like Xenical or Ally, you're not doing yourself any better. And unfortunately...
But it's so much easier than paying attention to what you're eating.
Yeah, I know.
Can't you just take a pill?
Yes, you can, but you're not going to get it from me anymore. So yeah, this is just another thing to sort of take into consideration when you're using products like that or considering using products like that. Everything has a side effect. So substitutions or replacements or trying to... There are carb blockers now too, and those aren't really new because there are carb blockers that have been on market for diabetics, but also there are over-the-counter things that are supposed to be carb blockers. So people trying to lose weight will use those things. But remember, it's just better to just eat real food and not deal with these other issues, because if you don't change your habits, it's like you're going to be constantly trying to battle this just with Band-Aids. So that's Olestra.
All right. Which, speaking of eating real foods, this is a big one, and this one actually makes me really sad. The term organic.
Yep. So, yeah. I mean, just because something is organic doesn't necessarily mean that it's great for you. Yes, if you're finding the right foods and they're organic, that is going to be good for you. But you can have organic stuff like
the organic macaroni and cheese.
Organic macaroni and cheese is a good example. You can also, if we're just talking about grain products, you can have organic corn.
Yes.
And so, like, if you're somebody like me, you're probably going to have digestive issues with corn. And if you have constant exposure to something like that, and you don't recognize that issue, it can cause a disruption in your gut wall, which is like your first barrier against your environment. So keeping things out of your body that aren't supposed to be there. So yeah, the term organic can be slapped onto stuff that is, again, maybe not inherently great for you to begin with. So that is one example. What else you guys got?
I can't necessarily think of another example off the top of my head, but I get it's just very sad that this is a label that actually used to mean something, or it used to mean something more. Now you can put organic on just about anything, because there are so many different ways to just kind of game the system and work around basically what qualifies as organic, but ends up giving you a product that's not necessarily nutritionally beneficial.
Yep.
And unfortunately, a lot of small farmers that are doing the right things can't afford to go through all of the hoops they have to go through financially to get something labeled organic.
Yeah, that's also another great thing to take into consideration, is just because something is not labeled organic doesn't mean it is not organic. So you may have a farmer that just hasn't been able to afford that sticker, pretty much, but they're using those practices. So that's something you can think about, especially if you're talking to somebody at your farmer's market. You can ask them about that.
Or any of the you pick places that are really big here in the Midwest. You pick berries, you pick apples. If you're at the farm and you can see what they're doing,
yep,
that's going to be great.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So one other product, because I have a note here from when I previously did this. So let's talk about agave nectar. You can have organic agave nectar. Agave nectar is not something that is naturally occurring in nature.
Totally thought agave nectar was really good for you like a year or two ago. Yes. They got me.
Yep. But agave nectar is basically high fructose agave syrup. So it is an extract from the agave plant, but it is fructose primarily as the sugar. We can have a whole other podcast on how fructose is bad for you.
And we might.
Yeah, we may. But just another thing to consider, organic just is not necessarily something that carries a lot of weight anymore. Not to say that it's not something you should consider when you are looking for your products, though. All right.
And is this the last one, or is there more here?
I think there are more. Let's see.
Oh, geez. So many terms. All right, so this one, high protein.
Yep.
I know a lot of people, including you, Hector, especially back in the day when because guys that are into working out and women that are into working out, They want those protein supplements. High protein. Gotta eat it. Gotta have it. Very
Protein.
important.
Mom, where's the protein?
Protein. There's literally a commercial, a yogurt commercial where they say that.
Oh, what about the Taco Bell commercial? Protein.
Yes, and Taco
Protein.
Bell with the protein because of the triple steak burrito or whatever it is.
So yeah, let's talk about protein. So yeah, protein has some value to it, but we need to consider that. So here's a new idea that I was introduced to recently, and it's people don't need protein. We need amino acids. There are no essential proteins. We do have essential amino acid needs. We can make or manufacture our own proteins out of the right amino acids. So amino acids are the constituents or the building blocks of proteins. So that is one thing to consider. But also, the need for protein historically, and even in recent history, has been definitely overshot. Protein has carried a lot more weight than it really needs to. And there are a lot of variables that go into this. And yeah, not all proteins are created equal. So one example is like soy. And I've eaten a lot of soy because it was thought to be like an animal source of a vegetable source, vegetarian source of a complete protein. But one of the things that is an issue with soy is phytoestrogens, so xenoestrogens, estrogens that are bioactive in humans that are foreign or plant-based, but they are active in humans. So that can in women that can cause issues with increased risk for certain type of cancers, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, and for men it can cause issues similar. So you can still have a risk for like breast cancer with men if you're introducing phytoestrogens. But also it changes your body fat deposition pattern. So where you are storing fat, and for men it could be like gynecomastia or man boobs. So that is a big issue with soy itself, and I think I'm jumping ahead of myself with the soy because I think that's supposed to come up later. But that is a protein source. So just because something is high in protein doesn't necessarily mean that it is the greatest for you.
Yeah, just kind of going along with that, it's the simple idea that not all proteins are created equal. It almost like a calorie conversation. Not all calories are created equal. Just because you're getting 50 grams of protein, but maybe you're getting it from soy, maybe you're getting it from beans, doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have the same effect as getting 50 grams of protein from a quality animal source. So that's just something to be aware of.
Yep, and not to say that 50 grams is a serving size either.
Yeah,
Bless
that's
you.
a lot.
I like protein.
A lot of people like protein.
Yeah. So another thing with high protein, I mean, you can talk about like a dairy product being high protein, and it could be like soy milk can be considered high protein by some, but you also have to consider that there are other things that come along with it. So you may have a high lactose content that comes along with a milk product, or if you are somebody who is trying to stay in ketosis, like you're being strict with a ketogenic diet, proteins can actually cause an insulin response. So you have to be careful of that also. So when you are fat adapted and you are able to use ketones for energy, proteins you can be more insulin sensitive to proteins. So a whole bunch of different issues that can come along with the high protein or seeking out of strictly protein.
Okay. Low sodium / no salt.
Yeah, we skipped one. Let's go. Actually, let's
No,
talk about that and we'll come back to it. We skipped this. Anyway, so low sodium, no salt. So we have, in recent history, vilified salt, and people are avoiding salt, and it's causing all kinds of issues. For anybody that is familiar, there is a book that just came out. It's called The Salt Fix. It was actually written by a fellow pharmacist of mine, and I was really surprised about that, and it made me really curious about it. So I haven't actually read the book, but I've listened to a lot of podcasts that he has been making appearances on. And it is intriguing to think about how we've artificially created an environment where we are not getting salt that we need. So take into consideration that we are made up of, we're a chemical soup, right? Again, I'm using the term chemical. But we are made up of a bunch of different ions, and that's what salt is. So you think of like potassium, magnesium, calcium, chloride, you name it, and those are salt ions. So we need them. We remove them because there was a lot of monoionic, or we're basically loading up with a lot of like if we're talking about table salt, it's all sodium chloride. You give yourself a bunch of sodium, you're going to throw off your electrolyte balance, you're throwing off your salt balance, and your body tries to balance that out by, all right, I have to try to get rid of sodium, but you're also going to cause potassium wasting when you're getting rid of sodium. So you're peeing out all this sodium, it's robbing you of potassium along with it, and then you throw off, maybe your calcium chloride, and there's a whole bunch of issues that happen. So we're decreasing our salt because we're scared of it now. Which is paradoxically, and it's not really a paradox, but we're having the opposite effect of what we want. So this can actually cause increases in heart rate, increases in blood pressure, and all kinds of other issues hormonally, because your body is trying to balance out this problem that we're introducing because we're trying to avoid salt. So thoughts on this, guys?
Well, first of all, anything labeled low sodium tastes like crap. And secondly, it does very much matter what type of salt you're getting.
Yep.
So maybe you should talk about that, the difference between, say, sea salt and table salt.
I did just mention it, but just to make that clarification. So if we're talking about table salt, that is basically like sodium chloride and iodine, which it was fortified with because...
Iodized,
again,
that's why it says iodized on the label.
Yes. So that is something that again, during wartime, there was a deficiency. And so it was starting to be added into the salt. But yes, it is very different than if we're getting sea salt or a rock salt of some sort, because of the different numbers of ions that are in the salt. So you think about like sea salt, and there's supposed to be like 80 to 90 something different ions that are included in there, versus if you're doing table salt where you're just getting sodium and chloride and iodine. So you have 3 things going on there versus the 80 to 90, and your body is a lot better able to balance what it needs based on that. And actually, from what I hear from this gentleman that I'm talking about, I forgot his name. I think it's something kind of Italian, like Nicola Antonio or something like that. But anyway, he talks about how hydration status changes because of our electrolyte imbalances, and a lot of people that are quote unquote dehydrated is because their electrolytes are imbalanced, and the issue isn't that they're not getting enough water, is that they're not replenishing electrolytes that are lost during sports performance, or if you're trying to eliminate salt from your diet, you're just not giving your body just essentially what it needs as far as those electrolytes. So
that's what Gatorade is for.
I mean, that's a step in the right direction as far as science and knowing that we need to replenish it. But Gatorade, it tastes like sweat, so they introduced a bunch of sugar along with it, which they claimed is going to help you out with that sports performance, because now you have energy along with it, which is true to some extent. But if you're not using that energy, which many people that are drinking Gatorade aren't, they're sitting in front of their TV drinking Gatorade, so now you're just carb loading along with the electrolyte balance is still not there with something like Gatorade. It's definitely better than not having, or actually it probably isn't. Never mind. Don't drink Gatorade. But yeah, the wrong people are using Gatorade, and it's just causing more issues than it's even trying to solve.
Okay. Yeah, salt is another thing that my mom keeps trying to eliminate from my dad's diet because he loves salt. Of course, he uses table salt, but still, she's always telling him he uses too much.
Yeah. And, there are case studies along with this pharmacist that I'm talking about, where the reason that he came up with this book is because he had a lot of patients that were having issues with blood pressure and actually ending up in the hospital because of issues with blood pressure. And by reintroducing salt, not sodium chloride, not table salt, but salt to their diet and supplementing with it, they were actually getting better and being able to get off of diuretics, get off of blood pressure medications. So this is an issue where you're attacking the wrong issue, or attacking it from the wrong angle. And again, with diuretics, you're also causing wasting of electrolytes because you're forcing your body to lose water, and it's taking those things along with it because it's basically osmosis that you're trying to create a gradient down. So you're getting your body to get rid of this stuff, and it can be detrimental to your health rather than helpful.
There you go. Sea salt. It also tastes better than table salt, I think. That's just me.
Well, I mean, your palate is to the point where it knows what it needs.
Yep.
And another interesting thing.
It's actually a little bit saltier than table salt.
Your body.
You need less.
Your body actually has a cutoff switch for salt. You know, if you think about it, you've probably had stuff where you're like, oh, that's just too salty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your body is telling you you don't need that salt. You do not have that mechanism for sugar or carbohydrates in general. So your body doesn't tell you. And fructose actually, again, coming back to the fructose will inhibit your satiety, so you don't feel full. But, to compound the issue, you almost never come to the point where you're like, I've had enough sugar. Yeah, you might be something is too sweet, but you may continue to feed. Yeah, you may continue to feed on carbs. So think about you'll be like, wow, that dessert is too sugary, but you might come back to, oh, but this pasta with primavera sauce is still good.
That's fair.
And yeah, your body metabolically will treat it very much the same way. So there's that.
Okay.
So talking about that, let's go on to our next term. Unless you have something to say about
salt. Look at that segue.
The low sodium, no salt thing, again, just kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. When they take the sodium and the salt out, talking about food products, when they market it that way, low sodium, they're replacing it with something. It's either going to end up being more sugar or some kind of fat, and it may not be the healthiest fat for you, so that is something to take into account.
Okay.
Actually, since you talked about that replacing, so there was this DASH study that was done, and everybody said, okay, we need to reduce the amount of salt that is in our diet, whatever. But the substitute, so a lot of people are taking sodium chloride out of their diet and using a potassium substitute. So now you have a different salt that you're loading up on. So like if anybody's heard of Mrs. Dash, and I think like Papa Dash, so they're variations of the same product.
We had those in our cabinet growing up.
Yeah. So these are low sodium or sodium free. I don't know because I didn't really care to look. But you're basically replacing that salt with another salt, not necessarily a good salt. And I don't want to throw Papa Dash and Mrs. Dash under the bus, but just because you said if you take something out, usually there's going to be a substitution for it, and that is a case where all right, you don't want that sodium in your diet? Well, we have this other product for you, which may not necessarily be a great substitute, but it's creating a market. So there is that.
Real quick, just because you mentioned the ketogenic diet and nutritional ketosis a couple times, I've actually seen that's the reason why with fasting, more so than the ketogenic diet, if you're going to go through any kind of fast of a significant length, they actually recommend supplementing with certain minerals and ions because that's just how important they are. If you're eating nothing else, you still need those minerals and those ions to keep your body functioning properly.
Yes, and that is something since you mentioned that, where it's a micronutrient need and not a caloric need. So you're looking at your body has plenty of calories on it. So if we're talking about fasting, a lot of people do it for weight reduction. That's primarily where you see it therapeutically. Some people do it for health maintenance now, and not just now. I mean historically, but it's getting the spotlight because it's so great for obesity and diabetes, and just like a metabolic reset. So yeah, you have all of this fat that is calorically rich on you, but you need to give your body the salts to balance out the metabolism also. So yes, that is true also. All right, so let's talk about the next term, which we had a segue to, but we went away from it.
Damn it, Dan. Sugar-free, no sugar added. X% less sugar.
All right, so...
Sugar-free just means they've added sugar substitute, pretty much, universally.
Artificial sweeteners, or again, more salt or more fat.
Yeah, or something might have just been naturally sugar-free. Like sugar-free asparagus, or I've never seen that, but that's just a ridiculous example of something that like sugar-free beef. A lot of times sugar is added to beef, but like why?
You
Why
were
is
just
sugar?
you were just looking at
Oh, beef broth.
that had sugar in it, and you're like, why?
It had cane sugar. Yeah, it was an organic product.
It's just a
that
flavor
had
thing.
Organic cane sugar that was added to it.
But that's not something that is necessary. I make my own beef broth. You don't need to add sugar to it to make it taste good.
Yeah, so this
Salt and pepper's fine.
This could have actually fit into our no other conversation where we were talking about no cholesterol, no trans fat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the sugar-free thing or no sugar added or X% less sugar. I mean, generally you should be avoiding sugar to begin with. But
that almost always means that they've simply, going back to what you guys just said, just replaced it with a artificial, chemical, whatever, not occurring in nature that you can pick off the plant type of sugar substitute.
Yeah. So let's talk about artificial sweeteners or 0-calorie sweeteners for a moment.
They all taste like ass, and that's your body's way of letting you know you should not consume them. That's my opinion.
Yes. On top of not necessarily tasting great, I mean, there's a bunch of them out there. So there's aspartame, which is NutraSweet. There's sucralose, which is Splenda. There is, I don't know, there are a few new ones, and
There's the monk fruit now, which is kind of a big one.
So that's a natural one.
And stevia is a natural one.
Stevia is another natural one.
They both taste like crap.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And there's sugar alcohols too. There's a whole bunch of them. But let's talk about a few issues with that. So just outright, sugar-free, no sugar, or X% less sugar, usually is going to be a red flag on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, now there's less sugar in it, or less sugar than another product, but what is in it? So if we're talking about artificial sweeteners, so we have a 0-calorie artificial sweetener, and I'm going to use Splenda and NutraSweet as examples. So we have this gut flora, our microbiome, the good gut bacteria that actually helps us out with digestion. They need calories to survive also. We throw in these fake sugars, which they cannot use calorically, and it ends up starving them, and it can disrupt your gut flora. So now these things that are supposed to help you out with digestion are being thrown out of whack, and you, even if you're eating good foods along with it, you're decreasing your ability to digest them properly and actually get the nutritional value from them. So that's one issue. Another issue, arguably I think that just recently they were shown to not be carcinogenic, but that's still something that is out there. Like, is it a carcinogen? Is it not? If we look at mice studies, I think it has been shown to be yes. If we look at human studies, they say no. There's a whole bunch of controversy out there, but to me, it's like we shouldn't even be talking about this. Let's just move on without them. So that's the 0-calorie sugar substitutes, those two in particular. I'll let you guys comment on that if you like.
Going along with the idea that you brought up as far as the gut disruption that occurs as a result of consuming artificial sweeteners, if you take it to an extreme, hypothetically, that also has potential to contribute to things like, now they're saying that Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia as a general condition may be a result or contributed to at least by gut dysbiosis or an imbalance of the good gut bacteria versus the quote-unquote bad gut bacteria. So again, it becomes this thing where you're thinking you're eating an artificial sweetener or a no sugar, low sugar food, and what you're really doing, if you're making that a habit, is you're causing yourself some significant cognitive issues down the road. It's not a good trade-off, not by any means, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, cognitive and effective.
And there's also some research showing that again, the gut dysbiosis contributes to certain autoimmune issues, depression, anxiety, just all kinds of problems that we're seeing now as a result of gut microbes being thrown off. And if you're eating these artificial sweeteners, these low sugar, no sugar foods on a regular basis, you could be setting yourself up for some major problems with that.
Yep. Yeah. So if anybody is interested in following up research on that, just think about what do they call it? The gut-brain axis. And the gut is actually being referred to as a second brain now. So there is a lot of research that is coming out lately, or at least getting a lot of attention, that is saying, we really need to pay attention to what's going on with our guts. And so these things are not helping us. So there's that issue, throwing off gut flora, but there's also the issue of if you have a sweet tooth that you're trying to kick and you are just trying to replace it with other sweeteners, you're basically prolonging the issue. So most people, if they want to have sweets, they're going to find them one way or another. It's better just to cut them off and sort of just get rid of this sweet tooth, rather than perpetuating it, because you're still stimulating that flavor center, and you're basically addicted to that flavor, and it's not making things better in the long term. Yeah, you might avoid the caloric load, but you're still going to have that craving. So it's better for most people to just go off of sweeteners in general.
And if that is too difficult for you to just do it cold turkey, I know that, Hector, you're an all or nothing kind of guy.
I am.
Weaning yourself can be another. Don't substitute, just wean yourself. Like for me, coffee is a good example. When I was in my early 20s, I was drinking things like caramel macchiatos and frappuccinos and things that were just absolutely loaded with sugar. And now those things, they don't even taste like coffee drinks to me anymore. They taste like syrup. And I do still like a little sugar in my coffee, but I'm down to like, it was two teaspoons of sugar, and then it was 1 teaspoon of sugar, and now like half a teaspoon or even no sugar, as long as I have a little cream in my coffee, and it tastes fine to me. Unsweetened tea tastes fine to me now. So maybe it's just a matter of gradually changing your palate instead of trying to shock it from going from a caramel macchiato to black coffee. That's probably just going to make you angry. And you're going to want to throw the coffee at the wall, and then you're going to go get some sugar anyway. So I would suggest maybe weaning yourself off of it.
Yeah, it's actually something that I brought up in conversations with patients. Also, the idea that weaning yourself off of sugar is by no means easy. So don't think that's what it takes. A special kind of person to just go cold turkey off of sugar. I know I can do it. I'm sure he can do it, but I know it's not easy for everybody. And I tell people, you look at things like functional MRI studies they do with that. Cocaine and sugar affect the same parts of the brain. So it's literally like trying to overcome an addiction, and you may have to go through some certain withdrawal that's not going to be comfortable in order to get off of it completely.
Well, there you go. Really, I guess just find out what works for you.
Yeah. And if you are somebody that just has a sweet tooth, I'd say, think about it, a sensible indulgence. So like I still have like banana pancakes with honey, locally sourced honey. I actually get it from one of my gym members. So it's and it's not something that I have all the time. It's actually probably more like once a month now, if that even. But that's definitely going to be better than if you were constantly loading yourself up with NutraSweet or sucralose, whatever it is. So yeah, just some things to take into consideration. I'm not saying that you need to take it out altogether, but if you're somebody like me where moderation isn't your thing, it's going to be it's either there or it's not. I would vote for me just to avoid most of the time, but there are better alternatives. So if we're talking about honey, there's a lot of stuff nutritionally and as far as like immune function boosters that are in there. So it's not just sugar. Yes, there is sugar, but there are a lot of other things that come along with it.
There are nutrients in there, not just sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So there's the artificial sweeteners.
All right. Oh, the next term is vegan/vegetarian. Thinking that just because something is vegan means it's healthy. That is bullshit. Like most of these terms.
Yeah, I've had the conversation with certain patients where I've asked them, they're vegan, they're vegetarian, and I try not to make anybody wrong. I try to just understand where they're coming from with their choices and why they're doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I've had certain patients tell me, if I ask them point blank, why are you a vegan? Why are you doing it?
Right.
They'll tell me the reason why, and ultimately my response to them is, okay, if you're doing it for moral reasons, if you're doing it for religious reasons, totally understandable, that's your thing. But if you're doing it for health reasons, I have to tell you that that is not the best option for you in terms of overall health. Again, when you look at vegans, vegetarians, it always comes back to this idea that when you're going to take something out of your diet and you're going to deprive yourself of it, you're going to have to fill it in with something else. And unfortunately, a lot of times, especially with vegans, what they're replacing the meat and the animal products with is more soy, more
Yep.
corn, more wheats, more grains. They're not just constantly eating salads all the time. Uh, and, unfortunately, for better or for worse, some of the most unhealthy people I have met are vegan.
Yeah.
Either they're skinny fat, or they're obese, or they have autoimmune issues, they have metabolic issues. And I have to kind of be the wake-up call for them, or the bearer of bad news, that is most likely directly related to how they're eating, or rather how they're not eating, as a result of being vegan or even sometimes vegetarian, depending on how they're doing that.
So let's just throw this out there. Like, it's not impossible to be healthy and vegan or vegetarian, but it's definitely harder. So I just want to say that, it's nothing against veganism or being a vegetarian, but it is just harder because you make it more difficult to get all of the micronutrients and macronutrients that your body may need. And this is something, again, where, if we're talking about protein, like, people usually, one of the first questions they ask if you're vegan, like, where do you get your protein?
Where do you get your protein?
That's like one of the least of the concerns. It's really more the micronutrients that become an issue. Protein, like I said, is vastly overrated. People think that we need a lot more of it than we do. But it is the micronutrient deficiencies that become an issue with these diets. And you can do it, but it's definitely going to be harder. And you may have those substitutes with stuff that is not optimal for your health. So, just like you were saying, it might be you're eating a lot of soy, or, just a grain product in general to get stuff, or maybe even just a lot of legumes. And a lot of people have issues with legumes. So, yeah, some people are fine with them, but there are other people, you might be trying to...
legumes are beans, lentils,
peanuts, all that stuff. So, yes, they may be a source of nutrients, but are they the optimal source? And are they just not straight up detrimental to your health? That's another thing to consider. But yeah, it's just because something is vegan or vegetarian doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be great for you. And those lifestyles, like I said, they come with their own set of issues, but not to say that it's impossible.
Because after all, soda is vegan.
Yeah, that would be an excellent example of a vegan product that you should not consume. All right, so there's that, and we're coming to our last term.
All right, the very last term, and I know a lot of people. A lot of people do this partially just because nutrition is hard. You two are doctors, and you're still learning every day about nutrition. So the average person needs someone to just give me a little guideline. So people turn to things like Weight Watchers.
By the way, if your doctor is not continuing to learn, you need to get a different doctor.
Yes, because things change. But so a lot of people turn to programs like Weight Watchers and the Weight Watchers point value to make sure what they're eating is appropriate. And I feel like this goes up here a lot with calorie counting. I don't know a lot about the Weight Watchers point value, but I feel like a lot of it does associate itself with calories, just because some things that don't have many points are crap foods that you shouldn't be eating.
So I can speak to this a little bit because I've actually had a couple patients who have been on the Weight Watchers program, and I've asked them about it. Mm-hmm. So basically the way it breaks down is the Weight Watcher point value system. It gives certain foods certain point values.
Right.
And so let's say every day you're allowed to eat 20 points worth of food.
Uh-huh.
You have some butter on your bread. What bothers me about it, or what kind of gets me about it, or what I wish they would kind of modify, is the way they assign these points, because obviously people are going to try to game the system.
Yes, I know Hector has had clients that they don't eat all day so they can have a glass of wine and chocolate. So yep.
That's exactly right. And if like a piece of steak that is like a good quality grass-fed steak has 15 points to it, mm-hmm. but I can eat handfuls of candy and fruits and all these different things, and I've still only reached 15 points, most people are going to go, well, I'm going to have handfuls of this stuff because
right.
I don't want to just have one little piece of that. And that's the problem that I have with that point value system. It's great for people who maybe had no other frame of reference for how to set their diet and how to eat for themselves.
Right.
It's great for them. But you're going to reach a point, I think, where after you've done that for a while and you've gotten really good at it, and maybe you've lost some weight, maybe you've gotten to your goal weight, whatever it is, okay, well, what are you going to do from there? Because if you go off that point value system and you just keep eating whatever you want the way you were before, you're just going to gain it back.
Yeah, it's losing weight is not, diets and fads are not helpful. You'll lose the weight, but you have to change your lifestyle, or you'll always gain it back.
Yeah, and you mentioned the point of, we're doctors. I have to remind myself of this sometimes, that I've spent a decade, if not more, learning about this stuff and researching it. It's what I like to do. And it can be really confusing even when you're doing it on a daily basis, reading about these things and all that. So for people that go through this system, if it's worked for them, great, fantastic. I understand they needed some kind of way to get started. But what I'm saying is you're going to have to evolve past that at some point to realize that, okay, the point system, the calorie counting, it got me here. It's not necessarily going to take me to the next level, and I've got to get a little bit more detailed and a little bit more in depth on what I'm looking at with this to eat the best way possible.
Right.
Yeah, I would say my issue, I really don't know much about the Weight Watchers point value. I looked it up just because it was something that people threw out there, and I basically just took a screenshot, and I'm like, all right, you're assigning point values to stuff that isn't food. And we can give a shout out to Alex again about calling stuff food. But it's like, just from the screenshot that I have here, it's like, there's tofu, and there's soy sour cream, and soy pasta. I'm harping on soy.
What the hell is soy pasta?
I don't want to know. But what I'm saying is, this is making it okay to eat stuff that is not optimal for your health. And like you were talking about candy. So candy is just something if you're trying to optimize your health. So this is
like 3 Oreos has a point value in Weight Watchers.
Yeah. Yeah, so
they
it's like,
actually have, you mentioned the 100-calorie pack foods. They have Weight Watchers, like point
I've
bags
seen them.
now.
Yeah, working at Walgreens, we stocked them. That was my department, was the snack and candy department. So
so this is also, like, you could probably walk into a place like I was talking about in Harvey where it was a food desert, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to use my Weight Watchers as my strategy for taking back my health. And it's just bad information. So you're eating things that are lacking in actual nutrition. But they are considered food products. So it's basically perpetuating the issue with bad nutrition or bad health in general, and dealing with different populations. I've talked to several people who have tried to do well for their health, but they have the wrong information.
Yeah. And
because of that, they fail. And how long can you do that before you're just like, forget about it?
Yeah, screw it. It's just I'm meant to be fat and unhealthy. This is just my genetics.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do about it.
And I relate to that because, like I said, I had come to a point, even though I exercised a lot, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm just not meant to get below a certain % body fat. That's just my genetics, which is not true. Yeah, it may be a lot harder for some people, but you can get there if you have the right information to work with. So that's my issue with the Weight Watchers point value system. Is it's not a good educational tool for proper nutrition.
Okay. Anything to add, Dr. Dan?
Hector, you made a point about if you're a doctor isn't constantly reading about this stuff and learning about it, I strongly recommend finding a new doctor. I don't need to go through the whole story, but I recently had a checkup with an MD who, just based off of how he assessed my blood work and the recommendations he made for me based off of that, in short, he recommended that I get on a low-fat or no-fat diet and a low-cholesterol, no-cholesterol diet, even though my blood work, when you learn how to calculate it the right way, showed that I was at one of the lowest categories of risk for cardiovascular disease and obesity. That right there goes to say that he's not necessarily a bad guy. He's not necessarily at fault, but the guidelines that a lot of doctors are using are about 20 or 30 years behind the times on the data and the research, and it's just what they know how to do. It's just what they were taught at whatever school they went to. You need to find somebody who's more up to date with what's happening, because if they're even 10 years behind, they are way behind and they are not helping you to the best of their ability.
There you go. Nutrition is important.
Yep.
So, in conclusion, if any of our listeners want to try to reach out to either of you two, can they do that? And if so, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. I'm on a couple different social media venues. So I'm on Twitter at Dr. Davila DC. I'm also on Instagram as Dr. Davila DC. On Facebook, you can find me at facebook.com/TCPDD.
Okay. And what about you, Hector?
You want to tell them about your practice first?
Oh, yeah.
So Dr. Dan has a practice if you happen to live in the area.
Yeah, I also have a practice. So, we just spent the last couple of hours talking about diet and nutrition, but my primary focus in practice is actually chiropractic. I'm a specialist in terms of focusing on spinal and postural correction. And the dietary stuff, I just love discussing with patients on a day-to-day basis because of how important it is. And because I know there's no one thing that's going to get a person back to being completely healthy. Diet is incredibly important. But again, I'm a specialist in biomechanics, so I know that's also incredibly important. It can help people with all kinds of different issues. So if you want help with that or either one of these things, I practice in Willowbrook at DuPage Pain Management. Address is 555 Plainfield Road, Suite C, Willowbrook, Illinois, 60527. If you want to schedule an appointment with me, you can call the office at 630-887-9400, 630-887-9400.
Cool.
All right. And I am Dr. Hector Davila, registered pharmacist. I am no longer practicing as a pharmacist. I am to be found at Absolution CrossFit in LaGrange, Illinois. So I do train CrossFit. I am a level 1 certificate holder in CrossFit. I also have a USA weightlifting sports performance level 1 certificate, so I can help you out with your Olympic lifting. I am also a primal health coach. So if you need help just figuring out where do I start and how do I implement lifestyle changes into my life, even if you're not interested in the CrossFit or weightlifting portion, I can help you out with that. So you can visit me at Absolution CrossFit in LaGrange, which is at 700 East Elm Avenue, Suite A in LaGrange, Illinois. You can reach me at phone number 312-666-7317. You can find me on social media. I am on Facebook as /HectorCD, letter C, and then D like David. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Snapchat. You can find me on Twitter at El Ultimo Chicano. Yeah, there's no shortage of ways to find me.
Yes.
So.
And in fact, if this information was helpful to you, or if this was a lot of information thrown at you all at one time and you want to know more about nutrition, you want to start being healthier, Hector and his business partner Laura, who is also a primal health coach, who she actually works directly with Mark Sisson, yes?
Yes, Mark Sisson, the author of the Primal Blueprint.
They will be teaching a 6-week course, 6-week keto challenge, yes?
It's not just keto, it's just a Kickstart the New Year challenge.
Okay, Kickstart the New Year nutritional challenge.
There is a keto track.
If you do not live in the area, it is totally okay because this will all be done online, so you can talk to them and do this challenge from anywhere.
Yeah, let me not forget my email. So if you have questions, you can reach me at info@absolutioncrossfit.com, or you can visit me on my website, www.absolutioncrossfit.com. And my contact information is there also.
There you go. So hopefully you guys all found this somewhat educational. Hit either of these doctors up with any questions you might have, suggestions for other episodes that we can talk about, things that are difficult to understand or that you want further education on, and we'll pick their brains and, gain their knowledge, if you will.
All right. Thank you very much.